The Vesper Spire did not orbit Aurelian Prime. It pierced the velvet darkness above it, a monument of bioorganic towers and spun crystal bridges, tethered to the planet by a glittering ribbon of pure energy. Below, the capital city pulsed, the heart of the multi-species Aurelian block. But up here, in the cold, silent vacuum, the technocrats and the imperial court lived, breathed, and plotted in air, so pure it tasted like metal. In the maintenance stratum, the air tasted like ozone scrubbers and solvent. Aaron Hale pushed his buffer across the obsidian floor of the Grand Diplomatic Concourse. The floor was a kilometer-long mirror reflecting a nebulous stream visible through the vaulted ceiling. His reflection was a smudge, a stooped figure in a gray jumpsuit, pushing equipment that whined just slightly off-key. He was invisible, and that was precisely how he liked it. He was a ghost, lubricating the mechanisms of power. His comm bead, tucked discreetly behind his ear, chimed with a private frequency. He kept polishing, his movements rhythmic, practiced. "Hey, Nova Bug," he murmured, his voice a low vibration, the glittering Xylos ambassadors and stern Vosk dignitaries, arguing treaties nearby, would never hear. Still awake past curfew, a sleepy, static-laced voice replied, his daughter, 10 years old and orbiting in the cramped residential ring 5 levels below. "It is loud up there. It sounds like the whole spire is shouting." Aaron permitted himself a small, tired smile. "It is just a party, sweetheart. A very shiny party where everyone is trying to talk louder than their shoes. Big, uncomfortable shoes. You should see the High Regent's boots. I think they are powered by tiny, angry animals." A small giggle. "Dad, that is gross." "It is the truth. Now, go to sleep. You need your rest." "Can you tell me a story first?" she asked. "I am on shift, Nova Bug." He steered the buffer around the plinth of a statue depicting the first Empress subduing a void kraken. Just one quick one." "Okay. Okay. The one about the screw." Aaron sighed, but the warmth in his voice was unmistakable. He navigated the buffer into a shadowed alcove, pretending to clean a ventilation grate. "All right. So, there was this tiny, ordinary iron screw," he whispered into the comm. "He lived in the maintenance tubes of the biggest palace in the galaxy, and he looked up every day at the glitter steel bolts holding the Empress's throne. And he was sad," Nova finished sleepily. "He was sad," Aaron agreed. He went to the chief mechanic and said, "I want to be a prince." The chief mechanic laughed. "You are just a screw. You are not made of chromium. You do not have a torque-rated head. You cannot be a prince." So the little screw went back to his tube. But that night, the throne started to wobble. "The vibration," Nova whispered. "The vibration." The big chromium bolts could not stop it. The palace was going to shake apart. And the little screw. He saw a tiny hole, right in the main joint, hidden under all the gold plate. He squeezed himself in, tight as he could, and the shaking stopped. The Empress was safe. And he was a prince. "Nope," Aaron said, pushing the buffer back into the light. No one ever saw him, but he knew he was not just a screw. He was the screw that held the entire thing together. "Now sleep, Nova Bug." "Good night, Dad." The channel clicked shut. Aaron let the silence of the concourse settle back over him. He hated these diplomatic functions. They always meant more spills, more scuffs, and a higher security mesh that made the air prickle. He was a janitor, a single dad hiding in plain sight, living in the vents of an empire that classified humans as third-tier citizens, fit only for the maintenance stratum. They were the plumbers, the electricians, the cleaners. They were the screws, holding the glittery, multi-species utopia together, and entirely unseen. He had been polishing the same stretch of floor for 11 minutes, lost in the memory of his daughter's voice, when the vibration came. It was not the polite thrum of the spire's engines. It was a dull, sickening thud that came through the soles of his boots. The crystalline chandeliers overhead chimed violently. A high-born lady of Cygnus stumbled, her gaseous form wavering. Then the alarms blared. Not the polite chime for a containment failure. This was the piercing, invasive shriek of a core security alert. Alert! A calm, synthetic voice echoed through the concourse. Explosive decompression detected in Sector Gamma. Gravity garden compromised. Royal nursery adjacent. Bio-protocol initiated. All sectors sealed. Aaron's blood turned to ice. Royal nursery. Red emergency lighting washed the obsidian floor in blood. Heavy containment doors slammed shut, sealing the concourse. This is a high-security lockdown. The synthetic voice continued. All maintenance stratum personnel, remain at your stations. Await sentinel clearance. Aaron ignored it. He abandoned the buffer and ran. He sprinted past guards who were shouting into comms, past diplomats clustering in terror. He knew this layout better than they did. He was maintenance. He knew the guts. He slammed his hand against a service panel hidden behind a silk tapestry. It hissed open, revealing a cramped maintenance corridor. He plunged into the darkness, running toward the nursery wing. The scene at the royal nursery was chaos. 2 Imperial sentinels, 7 feet tall in polished white armor, were uselessly banging on the main door to the children's wing. The massive blast door was sealed tight. "It is locked," one sentinel yelled. "The biocode is mismatched. It is not accepting the Empress's override." "The explosion in the garden must have scrambled the sensors," the other shouted, his voice tinny over his helmet speaker. "It is reading the occupants as contaminants. The air scrubbers are activating. It is decompressing the room." Aaron shoved past them. "The auxiliary panel. Where is it?" The first sentinel grabbed him, shoving him back. "Out of the way, human. This is Imperial business." Aaron did not waste time arguing. He ducked under the guard's arm and slammed his boot into a small, unmarked plate near the floor. The panel sprang open, revealing a tangle of fiber optics and synaptic wiring. "I said, move!" the guard roared, raising his weapon. "Do you want them out? Or do you want to shoot me?" Aaron snapped, not looking up. His voice was no longer the warm, soft tone of a father. It was cold, sharp, and absolutely authoritative. The guard froze. Aaron reached for the tool clipped to his belt. It looked like a standard-issue mop. It was not. He had built it himself, piece by piece, smuggling components over 6 years. He twisted the handle. A small compartment hissed open, revealing a compact, integrated micro-nanite pump. He jammed the nozzle into the auxiliary port and flooded the mechanism. A fine, silvery mist seeped into the wiring. "What are you doing?" the second guard demanded. "That is a nanite bath. You will corrupt the entire system." "I am balancing the charge," Aaron said, his voice a low growl of concentration. He did not use a datapad. He did not hack the code. He pressed his bare, calloused palms flat against the nanite-slicked panel. He closed his eyes. To the guards, he just looked like a man touching a wall. But in his mind, Aaron could see it. He saw the structure, the flawed architecture, the panic in the machine's logic. The biolock was tripping over itself, caught in a loop. He was not a janitor. Not really. He was, or had been, a biosystems architect. One of the best. A man who designed living ecosystems, symbiotic machines that breathed and thought. A man who had fled that life to protect his daughter. Now, he used those forbidden skills, channeling his focus, his hands moving over the panel as if conducting an invisible orchestra. He was not breaking the lock. He was teaching it. He guided the magnetic fields, weaving a new key from the chaos. his fingers moving with the speed and precision of a master artisan. He felt the tumblers, not metal, but strands of code, align. The red warning light above the door flickered to amber. "It is working," the first guard whispered, stunned. "Get ready," Aaron grunted. With a heavy hydraulic sigh, the blast door ground open. The room inside was a wreck. The explosion in the adjacent gravity garden had shattered the reinforced glass wall. Plants, soil, and glittering hydrostatic gel were splattered everywhere. The air was thin and cold, the scrubbers sucking the life from the room. Two small girls, older than Nova by a few years, were huddled under a reinforced play table. They were identical, Princess Astra and Princess Mira, the twin heirs to the Aurelian block. Astra was glaring, defiant, and terrified. Mira was weeping silently, her small hands pressed over her ears. Aaron moved slowly. He knelt, keeping his hands visible. The sentinels stayed back, guarding the door. "Hey," Aaron said. His voice, instantly, was the one he used for Nova. Soft, calm, unhurried. That was a loud noise. Astra's head snapped up. "Who are you?" "You are maintenance." "I am," Aaron agreed, nodding. "My name is Aaron. It looks like you made a bit of a mess in here." "The wall broke," Mira whispered, her voice trembling. The scrubbers whined, the pitch rising. "I see that," Aaron said. "The air is getting a little thin. I think it is time to go. We are going to play a game. It is called Hold Your Breath and Walk to the Shiny Men." He did not wait for an answer. He moved in one smooth motion, scooping Mira under one arm and grabbing Astra's hand with the other. "Let's go." Astra resisted, but Aaron's grip was firm. He pulled them from the room just as the final atmospheric purge kicked in, flash freezing the remaining air in the nursery. He handed the two, trembling, soot-stained princesses to the stunned sentinels. "Empress en route," one guard said, his voice shaky. "The sector is secure." Aaron just nodded. He picked up his mop, the nanite pump retracting into the handle with a quiet click. He turned to leave, to fade back into the service corridors, back to the invisibility he craved. "Halt!" The voice was not loud, but it stopped everyone. The sentinels snapped to rigid attention. The air itself seemed to grow colder. Empress Seraphine Kale stood at the end of the corridor. She was flanked by her personal guard, but she alone held all the power. She was tall, encased in a simple but severe gown of state that seemed to absorb the light. Her face was pale, beautiful, and utterly devoid of emotion. She was a creature of pure logic, the woman who balanced the conflicting interests of a dozen species through sheer, pragmatic will. She did not look at her children. Her gaze was fixed on Aaron. "The sentinels report an explosion," she said, her voice a flat, melodic contralto. "They report the royal nursery biolock failed. They report you opened it." "Yes, Your Majesty," Aaron said, his eyes on the floor. "How?" "The auxiliary panel. I bypassed the biocode loop." "The auxiliary panel is sealed," Seraphine stated. "It requires a level 9 technocrat clearance and a synaptic key." "It was stuck, Majesty," Aaron lied, his heart hammering. "I hit it. It opened." Seraphine stepped closer. She looked at his mop. She looked at his hands, stained with the silver nanite solution. She looked at the panel, which was already sealing itself, erasing the evidence of his intrusion. A security aide beside her murmured, "Majesty, the internal logs. They are anomalous. The bypass signature used. It is an encrypted biosystems code. Extremely old. Extremely classified." Seraphine's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. Before she could speak, a new voice, smooth and laced with false concern, joined them. "A tragedy, averted by the narrowest of margins." High Regent Theros Vale emerged from the shadows. He was a tall, thin man, whose elaborate robes seemed to hang on his skeletal frame. His eyes, however, were sharp and intelligent. "One must wonder," Theros said, gliding past Aaron to inspect the damaged door. "How this happened. An explosion so close to the heirs, and a maintenance worker, a human, right here, at the perfect moment." Aaron felt the accusation land. "I was cleaning the Grand Concourse. I heard the alarm." "Cleaning." Theros smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. "With what, precisely?" That he gestured to Aaron's mop. "The human stratum grows restless. Perhaps this was sabotage, an attempt to prove their value by manufacturing a crisis." "My daughter is down in the residential ring," Aaron said, his voice dangerously low. "I have no interest in crises." "Your family is irrelevant," Theros dismissed. "Regent," Seraphine cut in, her voice sharp. The Empress finally turned her attention to her daughters. The sentinels had set them down. Mira was hiding behind the guard's leg, but Astra, ever the bold one, stepped forward. "He was not scary," Astra announced, pointing at Aaron. "He told us to play a game," Mira whispered, emerging slightly. She looked at Aaron, her eyes wide with a strange focus. "His voice is warm. It stopped the shaking." Aaron froze. The children were looking at him, not their mother. A royal doctor, a woman with tired eyes, hurried forward and began scanning the twins. She frowned, checking her readings. "Empress," the doctor said, her voice hushed. "This is highly unusual. Their neural stress patterns, their heart rates. They are elevated, of course, but they are stable. It seems." She paused, looking at Aaron in disbelief. "They have imprinted on his vocal frequency. During the trauma, his voice acted as an anchor. It is a rare, deep-level synchronization." Theros Vale looked disgusted. "Imprinted like waterfowl, do not be ridiculous, Doctor." "It is a documented phenomenon. High Regent," the doctor insisted. "Their biosignatures are entangled with his. Removing him abruptly now, it could cause significant psychic shock. They perceive him as their protector." Astra proved the point. She walked right past her mother, tugged on the leg of Aaron's jumpsuit, and demanded, "Tell us the screw story." Silence descended on the corridor. Theros looked horrified. The sentinels looked terrified. Aaron looked trapped. Empress Seraphine Kale observed the scene. She analyzed the political threat Theros, using this as leverage against the human stratum and the biological anomaly, Aaron, now mentally tethered to her heirs. As always, she chose the most logical, pragmatic solution. She looked at Aaron Hale, the janitor who had just performed an impossible feat of engineering. "Your assessment is noted, Doctor," Seraphine said. She turned her icy gaze back to the High Regent. "The investigation will be thorough. Theros, you will not use this as an excuse for a purge." "Majesty," Theros began. This human," Seraphine interrupted, "is no longer maintenance. He is an asset." She locked eyes with Aaron. There was no gratitude in her expression. It was a command. "Janitor Hale, you will be reassigned. You will be housed in the Imperial Wing. You are now the temporary custodian of the Princesses Astra and Mira." Aaron's world tilted. "Majesty, I cannot. I have a daughter, Nova. She is waiting for me." "She will be brought to the Imperial Wing," Seraphine replied, as if discussing logistics. "You are not a prisoner, Mr. Hale. You are a resource. The heirs require your presence for their stability. You will provide it." She turned, her robes sweeping the floor, and began to walk away. "See to it." Theros Vale stared at Aaron, his eyes burning with suspicion and sudden, venomous rivalry. The sentinels, looking thoroughly confused, gestured for Aaron to follow. Aaron Hale, the single dad who had buried his past as a biosystems architect, the ghost who wanted only to remain invisible, picked up his mop and followed the Empress. He was a prisoner of the state, trapped not by chains, but by the terrified imprint of two royal children. The Imperial Wing was not just a residence. It was a statement of gravitational dominance. Aaron Hale's new quarters were a 3-room expanse of self-tinting crystal and shimmering silken walls, overlooking the curve of Aurelian Prime. The air was scented with alien pollens and recycled with a silence that unnerved him. His old, maintenance stratum bunk, tucked near a humming power conduit, had felt safer. Nova, his daughter, arrived under the escort of 2 towering sentinels. She held a single, scuffed bag and stared at the suite with wide, terrified eyes. "Dad," she whispered, clutching his arm. "This room is bigger than our whole corridor. Are we prisoners?" Aaron knelt, pulling her into a tight hug. He was still wearing his gray janitor's jumpsuit, stubbornly refusing the fine silk tunics laid out for him. In the corner, next to a fluid sculpture that defied physics, leaned his mop. The sentinels had tried to confiscate it. Aaron had simply said, "It comes with me." The Empress's order had been to move him, and in his mind, the mop was part of him. "We are not prisoners, Nova Bug," he murmured into her hair. "We are guests. Very important, very strange guests. It is just for a little while." A court attendant, a tall, reedy Xylos, whose skin shimmered with polite disapproval, glided into the room. "The Imperial heirs will be arriving for their mandated 2-hour stabilization session," the attendant announced, his voice a chime of plucked strings. He pointed a long, crystalline finger at Aaron's mop. "That item is leaking cleansing solvent onto the floor. It is unacceptable." "It is supposed to leak solvent," Aaron said flatly. "It cleans things." The attendant looked as if he might faint. "The floors are nano-cleaned hourly. Human. Remove it." "No," Aaron said. The attendant's shimmer flickered. Before he could argue, the chime for the royal children sounded. Princess Astra and Princess Mira entered. They were scrubbed clean from the explosion, dressed in identical, severe white tunics. Their boots were immaculate, sealing themselves around their ankles with a soft magnetic hiss. They looked at Aaron, then at Nova, their expressions wary. Aaron looked at their boots. "Nice shoes," he said. Astra, the bolder one, stepped forward. "They are standard-issue bioformed footwear." "Right. Can you tie them yourselves?" Astra frowned. "Tie them why they form to our feet." "What happens if the power fails?" Aaron asked. He walked to his own duffel, the one Nova had brought, and pulled out a pair of old, worn-out sneakers. They had laces. "This is a lace. This is a knot. This is how you keep your shoes on when the machines stop talking." He sat on the priceless silk floor, ignoring the attendant's horrified gasp, and began to demonstrate the simple, ancient loop and pull method. Nova, sensing her father's purpose, sat beside him and helped. Mira, the quiet twin, crept closer, her eyes fixed on the laces. Astra stayed back, her arms crossed. "That is inefficient. Tutors teach us neurostrategy and kinetic defense, not string." "Great," Aaron said, not looking up. "But if you cannot tie your shoes, you will lose a boot running from the kinetic defense tutor. Sit down, Princess." She hesitated. Then, intrigued by the sheer audacity, she sat. For the next 30 minutes, the heirs to the Aurelian block learned to tie a double knot. The attendant fled, presumably to report this profound breach of etiquette. The second scandal occurred an hour later. The playroom assigned to them was a holographic wonderland. They could simulate battles, design ecosystems, or fly imaginary starships. Aaron watched them for a while, then went back to his bag. He pulled out a worn canvas pouch. "What is that?" Mira asked, her voice barely a whisper. She was, Aaron noted, hyper-aware of everything, the hum of the lights, the scent of the air, the fabric of his jumpsuit. She was a living sensor. "Gravity blocks," Aaron said. He spilled the contents onto the floor. They were not anti-gravity. They were simple, weighted, interlocking plastic bricks. A cheap, ancient toy. "They are just blocks," Astra said, unimpressed. "Yep, let's see you build a tower." The princesses, whose education involved the manipulation of abstract data models, were baffled by the physical weight and balance. Their first towers collapsed. Astra became furious. Mira became frustrated. "It is not logical," Astra declared. "It is not supposed to be logical," Aaron said, adding a block to his own small structure. "It is supposed to be stable. Even royalty needs to stack blocks. Kids, it teaches you that some things fall down if you do not build them right." Nova, an expert, began building a small, sturdy bridge. Soon, all three children were on the floor, arguing over the blue and red blocks, in a scene so bafflingly normal, it was practically treasonous. That night, Aaron sat between their two beds. The princess's sleeping chamber was vast and cold, monitored by a dozen biosensors. "The sleep inducer is set for 8 hours, Astra informed him, reciting her schedule. "We are not using the inducer tonight," Aaron said, "but it is mandated our biorhythms are going to be fine. You are just going to close your eyes, and I am going to tell you a story." "We are read the Imperial Annals," Mira whispered from her pillow. "This is better," Aaron promised. "It is about a little, ordinary screw." He told the story, the same one he told Nova. He told of the tiny screw who wanted to be a prince, who was laughed at by the big chromium bolts, and who, in the end, held the entire wobbling throne together when the fancy bolts failed. When he finished, Astra was looking at him, her clever eyes sharp. "So the screw was smarter than the chief mechanic." "No," Aaron said. "He just knew what he was built for. He knew how to hold on." From the other bed, Mira's voice came, soft and strange. "I did not like it," Aaron turned. "Why not?" "It was heavy," Mira whispered. "When you said he squeezed into the hole, I felt it. It was tight and cold. But then it was quiet." The shaking stopped. Aaron stared at her. She was not just listening. She was feeling it. A bioempath. He had only read about them. "Well," Aaron said, getting to his feet. He held on. "That is the important part. Good night, princesses." He left them, not with a sleep inducer, but with an idea. And for the first time, according to the secret sensors their mother was monitoring, their sleep cycles synced without chemical assistance. In her observation chamber, Empress Seraphine Kale watched the data streams. She watched the janitor teach her daughters to tie shoes. She watched him introduce primitive, non-energy-based toys. And she watched their neural patterns, erratic since the explosion, smooth out. It was illogical. It was infuriating. And it was working. She initiated a series of tests. The next day, the nutritional dispenser in the children's suite malfunctioned. It produced a nutrient paste, flavored like fruit, but laced with a trace element from the Vosk homeworld. Harmless to most, but a severe allergen for Mira's specific biology. The royal doctor, watching the monitors, saw the chemical alert and was about to trigger an alarm. She was too late. Aaron, who was sitting with the children as they ate, had already taken the bowl from Mira. "How about," he said calmly, "you have the apple slices instead?" "But I like this paste," Mira said. "I know, but it smells wrong. It smells like burnt wires. The doctor, watching, was stunned. The Vosk trace element had no scent to a normal human nose. But to a biosystems architect, one who understood the interactions of alien minerals, it was a screaming red flag. Seraphine analyzed the report. The man was not just a protector, he was a diagnostic tool. The second test was one of moral education. Seraphine summoned Aaron to the Imperial Observatory. She stood alone, silhouetted against the swirling nebula. "You are disrupting their education, Mr. Hale," she said, her voice flat. "I am teaching them to tie their shoes, Your Majesty. I do not think it will damage their strategic minds. You are teaching them dependency on the obsolete. You are teaching them human values, inefficiency, sentiment. I am teaching them what happens when the machines fail," Aaron retorted, his voice quiet but hard. "You live on a spindle of glass and light, Empress. It is all perfect, until it is not. You have a nursery with a biolock that tries to kill your kids when the wall breaks. You have boots that cannot be tied. You have a system that relies on everything working, all the time. I am just teaching them what to do when it does not." Seraphine turned to face him. Her eyes were cold, but for the first time, curious. "You believe my empire is flawed, Janitor. I believe everything that does not have a manual override is flawed. Your Majesty, I believe in screws. They hold things together." Seraphine did not reply. She dismissed him, but the conversation lingered in her mind. He is not just a custodian. He is a philosopher, a dangerous one. While Aaron was adjusting to his gilded cage, High Regent Theros Vale was making his move. In the High Council chamber, a cavernous room where voices echoed, Theros addressed the assembled ministers of the Aurelian bloc. "The recent, tragic incident in the royal nursery was not an accident," Theros declared, his voice resonant with false sympathy. "It was a failure of security, and a failure of stratification." He activated the central display. It showed a diagram of the Vesper Spire. The maintenance stratum, the human stratum, was highlighted in ominous red. The human population has grown complacent, integrated into systems they were only ever meant to clean. They are too close to our power cores, our life support, our royal family. A murmur went through the alien dignitaries. "I propose," Theros said, his voice dropping, "the Human Reclassification Act, a full audit and rollback, removing all human personnel from sensitive sectors, for their safety, and for ours." The motion was tabled, but the seed of fear had been planted. Later, in his private chambers, Theros met with a cloaked figure. "The Empress resists," Theros said. "She coddles the human. She sees him as a tool. She is sentimental." "The Empress is a biologist," the figure hissed. "She values the strange. But the Chalice Order believes in logic. The Crown engine must be guided by a firm, analytical hand, not by biology." "The Chalice Order will have its way," Theros promised. "The Empress's pet janitor is an anomaly. We will use him. Let these small failures continue. Let the Spire feel the pressure. When the time is right, the Empress will be forced to choose between her empire and her pets, and the Order will be there to take control of the Crown engine." Aaron knew nothing of the High Regent's plots, but he felt the Spire. He had always been sensitive to the hum of complex systems, and the Vesper Spire was sick. It started small. The air regenerator in the Imperial wing developed a fault. For 3 hours, the oxygen mix was slightly too rich, making everyone irritable and jumpy until it was corrected. The engineers blamed a sensor ghost. Aaron, walking past the access panel, smelled it again. The faint, metallic tang of burnt wires. The same smell from Mira's nutrient paste. He waited until the corridor was empty. He checked the panel. It was not a ghost. A diagnostic filter, a tiny, simple component, had been deliberately scorched. Not enough to break the system, just enough to make it hiccup. A few days later, the Empress's private floral steam pools, designed to replicate the atmosphere of her homeworld, flash-boiled. No one was hurt, but it caused a panic. The engineers blamed a pressure valve. Then, the royal lift, the one used by Seraphine and her children, shuddered to a halt, trapping them between floors for 20 minutes. The engineers blamed a code fluctuation. Aaron saw the pattern: burnt filter, stuck valve, code fluctuation, all in different subsystems, all unrelated. Except they were not. To Aaron, they were a signature. It was an old, obsolete method of system probing. You did not attack the main system. You poked the small, forgotten extremities. You made the air conditioners and the elevators jitter, forcing the central system, the crown engine, to divert processing power to diagnose the trivial. You did it over and over, mapping the response. Someone was intentionally stressing the spire. Someone was teaching the crown engine to panic. He needed proof. He needed security logs. And he was just a janitor in a fancy room. There was only one person who had the access he needed, and she despised him. Captain Nix Arden, head of the Royal Guard, ran her command center with terrifying precision. It was a room of dark, polished metal and glowing tactical displays. When Aaron walked in, still in his jumpsuit, carrying his mop, the activity in the room did not pause, but the temperature dropped. Nix Arden looked up from her console. She was a woman carved from granite, her dark hair pulled into a severe knot. Her uniform was immaculate. "Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice was flat, containing a universe of disdain. "You are in a restricted area. I need your help, Captain. I am aware of your unique position," she said. "But the Empress's favor does not extend to my command center. State your business, or I will have you removed." "I think the spire is being sabotaged. I think the incidents with the air, the steam pools, and the royal lift are connected." Nix's expression did not change. "My engineers have filed reports on all three. They are unrelated equipment failures." "They are not," Aaron insisted. "They are deliberate. They all carry the same operational signature. Someone is probing the crown engine, and they are using an old, obsolete algorithm to do it." Nix finally gave him her full attention. "That is a very bold claim for a janitor." "I used to fix things," Aaron said. "So I have heard." Her eyes flicked to his mop. "You bypassed a biolock by hitting it. Forgive me if I do not trust your technical assessments." Right then, a sharp alarm chimed from the corner of the room. A guard swore. "Captain, the high-security arsenal. The dermal scanner is down. It is a full authorization mismatch. We are locked out." Nix Arden's face tightened. "Rerun the diagnostic." "We did, Captain. It is not reading your skin. It is not reading anyone's." Nix pushed back from her desk and strode to the weapons locker, a slab of polished black metal. She pressed her hand to the scanner. The light flashed red. "Access denied." She was furious. She was locked out of her own armory, in her own command center, in front of him. Aaron stepped forward. "May I?" Nix looked at him. "If you hit my arsenal, janitor, I will have you spaced." "I will not hit it." He leaned in, observing the scanner. He did not touch it. He listened. He felt the faint vibration in the wall. "It is not the lock," he said, after a moment. "The diagnostic says—" "The diagnostic is wrong. It is the power conduit. It is fluctuating. Just by 0.5 millivolt. But it is enough. The scanner cannot get a stable reading because the power feeding it is dirty." He knelt. Not at the lock, but at the base plate on the wall beside it. He popped the cover with his fingernails. Inside, a power junction sparked feebly. It is shielded, Nick said. You cannot bypass it without a full systems restart. Do not need to, Aaron murmured. He reached down to his boot and pulled a small, metallic clip from the heel. A simple, conductive bridge. He jammed it into the junction, shorting the faulty regulator and creating a direct, clean feed. It took him exactly 9 minutes. The light on the junction turned from flickering amber to solid green. Try it now, Captain, he said, standing up. Nyx Arden stepped forward, her face a mask of disbelief. She pressed her hand to the scanner. The light flashed green. Access granted. The heavy door hissed open. The room was silent. The guards were staring at Aaron. Nyx looked at the open door, then at Aaron. The disdain was gone. In its place was a cold, hard, professional respect. How did you know? She asked, her voice low. I told you, Aaron said, pocketing his clip. I used to fix things. He nodded toward her console. The logs. For the air scrubber in the Imperial wing, the pressure valve in the Empress's pools, and the royal lift. I need the logs for the last 48 hours. Nyx Arden stared at him for a long moment. I will get you the logs, she said. The true turning point, however, was not technical. It was human. Seraphine had allowed Nova to be housed with Aaron, but she had not anticipated the consequence. Nova, free from the confines of the maintenance stratum, was lonely. And she was curious. She found Astra and Mira in the holographic playroom. The princesses were practicing a complex, zero-gravity diplomatic simulation. Hello, Nova said, hovering in the doorway. Astra paused the simulation. You are not permitted in here without authorization. My dad is in the next room, Nova said, undeterred. What are you playing? It is not a game, Astra said haughtily. It is a simulation of the first Vosk treaty negotiation. It is very complex. It looks boring, Nova said. Astra's mouth fell open. It is not boring. It is essential. My dad says anything you have to call essential is probably boring, Nova countered. I have a game. It is better. She pulled a well-worn deck of cards from her pocket. Paper. Ancient. What are those? Mira asked, floating closer, intrigued by the physical object. Cards, Nova said. I can show you how to play Go Fish. It was a disaster. Astra did not understand why she could not just demand the cards she wanted. Mira was afraid of bending the corners. But within 20 minutes, the holographic room was dark, and the three girls were sitting on the floor, huddled around the deck of cards. Astra, it turned out, was a terrible bluffer. Mira, the bioempath, was terrifyingly good. She did not need to see the cards. She could feel when Nova was hiding the one she needed. When Aaron found them, they were laughing. A real, genuine, uncontrolled giggle as Astra accused Mira of cheating with mind powers. Seraphine watched it all on her private monitor. She watched her two daughters, bred for command and logic, utterly captivated by a maintenance worker's child and a stack of processed paper. She saw them share a snack. She saw Nova, without thinking, wipe a smudge from Mira's cheek, an act of simple, domestic intimacy that no attendant, tutor, or sentinel would ever dare perform. It was illogical. It was inefficient. And for the first time in her reign, Empress Seraphine Kale wondered if her definition of efficiency was wrong. The wall between the strata, so absolute in her mind, was being dismantled in her own playroom by three children playing Go Fish. That night, the Vesper Spire was quiet. Nova was asleep in her small adjoining room. The princesses were sleeping soundly, their dreams, for once, quiet. Aaron could not rest. He felt the thrum of the spire through the soles of his feet. It was wrong. The vibration was off. It was too high-pitched, too strained. He walked to the main ventilation grate in his opulent suite, a grate hidden behind a silk tapestry. He pressed his ear to the cold metal, and he heard it. It was not loud. It was a faint, melodic, repeating whine. It was a sound he had not heard in years, a sound no engineer on this spire, trained on modern, perfect systems, would ever recognize. It was the sound of a core AI caught in a recursive loop, trying to solve a problem it could not define. It was the sound of a machine in pain. The Crown Engine, the vast artificial intelligence that ran every system on the Vesper Spire, from the reactors to the life support to the royal toilets, was singing a glitch. The small malfunctions, he realized, were not probes. They were symptoms. The disease was in the core. Theros Vale, or whoever was behind this, was not just knocking on the door. He was inside. Aaron ran to the corner of the room. He grabbed his mop. He twisted the handle. Not the nanite pump, but a different section near the base. A seam opened, revealing a small, shielded data port and a single fiber optic wire. He jammed the wire deep into the maintenance socket hidden by the grate. He was not just a janitor. He was not just a biosystems architect. He was, for this one moment, the only doctor on the spire who could hear the patient screaming. A small, hidden screen on the mop handle lit up, displaying streams of diagnostic code. He isolated the harmonic resonance, the glitch song, and began a trace. The log file was small, but it was everything. It was the proof Nyx needed. It was the weapon Seraphine needed. And it was the map the saboteur was using. He saved the log, not to the Spire's network, which he knew was compromised, but to the shielded, isolated data core hidden deep inside the shaft of his mop. He leaned his head against the cold wall, listening to the engine sing. "I hear you," he whispered to the machine. "I hear you. Hold on. The screw is coming." The data log was a jagged spike of crimson code. Aaron Hale stood in the cold, efficient heart of Nyx Arden's command center, the file from his mop transferred to her secure terminal. The faint, repeating glitch song he had heard in the wall was now visualized. A parasitic melody infecting the Crown Engine. Nyx Arden stared at the screen, her face pale. "This is impossible," she breathed. Her professional calm shattered. "This is not a peripheral fault. This is core code. Someone is inside the engine." "They have been for weeks," Aaron said, his voice low. He pointed to a data string. "This loop, it is an old-style logic bomb. It does not attack the engine. It feeds contradictions. It is teaching the machine to doubt itself. The failures in the spire, the air, the lift, that is not the attack. That is the engine screaming for help." "By the first Empress," Nyx whispered. She ran a trace on the code's signature, her fingers flying across the console. The result made her freeze. "This encryption, it is ancient, Chalice Order." "I thought they were a myth," Aaron said. "A bogeyman for technocrats." "They were a real and dangerous cult, banished centuries ago," Nyx said, her voice grim. "They believed the engine should rule, not the Empress. That pure logic, unhindered by biology, should govern the block." "They need a human hand to open the door," Aaron said. "Someone with the highest level access. Someone who can walk past any security scan without question." Nyx looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. She did not need to say the name. "High Regent Theros Vale," Aaron finished. The accusation hung in the sterile air, heavy and treasonous. Nyx Arden was the Empress's sworn shield. To suspect the High Regent, the second most powerful man in the Aurelian bloc, was tantamount to sedition. "You are accusing a pillar of the imperial government," Nyx stated, her voice regaining its iron. "I am showing you the data," Aaron countered. "He was there at the nursery. He immediately blamed the human stratum. He is pushing the anti-human act in the council. He is isolating the Empress. And now this. It is a strong theory, Nick said, but it is not proof. I cannot arrest the High Regent because of a janitor's theory and a line of code. Then I will get you proof, Aaron said. I just need to see his face when he is near the children. His chance came the next day. The gravity garden, adjacent to the nursery, had been repaired. The shattered wall was replaced with a sheet of diamond-hard glass crystal. Aaron had taken the 3 children there, ostensibly to test the air. In reality, he wanted them in an open, public space. Nova, Astra, and Mira were, for once, quiet. The memory of the explosion was still fresh in this place. It still smells broken, Mira whispered, her small hand clutching Aaron's. It is just new parts, Aaron said soothingly. New parts always smell a little angry. You have to let them settle. Ah, the custodian, a smooth voice interrupted. High Regent Theros Vale glided toward them, flanked by 2 aides. He was a vision of refined power, his silver robes immaculate. He offered a thin smile that did not reach his cold eyes. I see you are acclimating the heirs to the site of their trauma, Theros said. A bold therapeutic choice. We are just getting some fresh air, High Regent, Aaron said, his body instinctively moving to shield the girls. Nova pressed closer to his leg. Of course. And the Imperial children, Theros said, turning his gaze on Astra and Mira. His smile remained, but his voice shifted, dropping almost imperceptibly in frequency, taking on a resonant, commanding quality. You must be good for your new caretaker. You must obey him in all things. Your stability is vital. You must be compliant. Aaron watched the twins. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Astra, always defiant, suddenly stood rigid. Mira, the sensitive empath, went blank. Their vibrant, chaotic personalities vanished, replaced by a calm, empty porcelain shell. Yes, High Regent, Astra said, her voice a perfect monotone. We will be compliant, Mira echoed, her eyes unfocused. It lasted only 3 seconds. Theros gave a satisfied nod, shot Aaron a look of amused condescension, and swept away. The moment he was 10 paces distant, Astra blinked, shaking her head as if emerging from water. Ugh, I feel cold. Mira just whimpered and hid her face in Aaron's jumpsuit. Nova, who had seen it all, looked up at her father in horror. Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling. What was that? Their faces. They were like my old dolls. Aaron's blood ran cold. It was exactly what he had feared. A biosynaptic override. A command phrase, keyed to Theros' voice, that triggered absolute, unconditional obedience. Nyx had been wrong. Theros was not just planning to control the crown engine. He already controlled the heirs. They were not just hostages. They were biological weapons. He had to tell Seraphine, but he needed a moment. He needed to clear his own head, and the heads of the terrified children. Back in the vast, sterile playroom, Aaron shut down the holographic displays. Okay, he announced, his voice deliberately light. New experiment. We are done with trauma. We are done with gardens. We are making soap bubbles. Astra looked at him as if he were insane. Soap bubbles, that is for infants. It is for scientists, Aaron corrected. He retrieved his mop, but not for the hidden tools. He used the attached cleaning fluid reservoir, mixing a capful of the potent, industrial-grade soap with a liter of purified water from the nutrient dispenser. The challenge, he said, is to make a bubble that can survive in low gravity. It is all about surface tension. He fashioned a loop from a stray piece of packing wire. He dipped it and blew. A perfect, shimmering sphere detached from the wand. In the spire's light, artificial gravity. It did not float up or sink. It simply hung in the air, wobbling. A perfect iridescent world. Nova gasped in delight. Even Astra looked intrigued. Soon, all three children were competing, trying to blow larger and larger bubbles, which drifted around the room like captive, silent jellyfish. The tension of the Theros encounter began to fade. Only Mira, the empath, was not playing. She had moved away from the others, her gaze fixed on one perfect, drifting bubble. "It is singing," she whispered. Aaron stopped, the wand halfway to his mouth. "What did you say?" "Mira." "The bubble," she said, her eyes wide. "No, not the bubble. It is everything. The air, the floor. It is the sound the spire makes. The sound you make." Aaron felt a chill run down his spine. He knelt beside her. "What sound?" "Mira." "The sound from the story," she said, her voice full of awe. "The one about the screw. When you said he held on, I felt the palace get quiet. It is that sound. It is a song. It is in the walls." She looked at him, her gaze piercing, suddenly wise beyond her years. "You hear it, too, don't you?" Aaron stared at the small girl. She could feel it. The crown engine's distress. The parasitic loop. The same glitch song he had captured on his mop. His warm voice was not just a father's trick. It was, to her, harmonically aligned with the deep, struggling consciousness of the spire itself. He was not just a janitor. He was, like her, a listener. "Yes," Aaron whispered, his throat tight. "I hear it too." He was furious. He left the children with Nova. "Keep making bubbles. Do not stop," and stormed through the Imperial corridors. He did not request an audience. He used his new, low-level custodian access to override the security on Seraphine's private study, and walked straight in. The Empress, Seraphine Kale, was standing over a holographic map of the entire Aurelian block. She looked up, her face a mask of cold fury. "Mr. Hale, you have exactly 10 seconds to explain this intrusion before I have you arrested." "He has them," Aaron said, his voice shaking with contained rage. "Theros. He has a key. A command code. He speaks, and your daughters turn off." Seraphine's coldness faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. "What did you see?" "I saw him order them to be compliant, and they became compliant, blank, empty, dolls. You are so busy balancing this entire map, you did not even see him put a leash on your own children." "They are trained in court etiquette," Seraphine shot back, her defenses rising. "They must show respect to the High Regent." "That was not respect, that was programming," Aaron shouted, taking a step closer. "You value order and stability so much, you cannot tell the difference between a person and a machine. You are building an empire of logic, but it is hollow. It has no heart." "And you," she hissed, "value human sentiment so much, you would risk anarchy. That order is what keeps this spire breathing. That logic is what prevents interstellar war. Your precious, messy humanity is a liability I cannot afford." "Logic did not save your daughters in that nursery," Aaron retorted, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "A guy with a mop did. We are the backup system. Seraphine. Humanity. Compassion. All that messy stuff you hate. We are the manual override for when your perfect machines try to kill you. But you have forgotten where the switch is." The silence in the room was absolute. They stood inches apart, a janitor and an empress, locked in a battle of wills, her icy pragmatism against his grounded fury. Finally, Aaron sighed, the anger draining out of him, leaving only a profound exhaustion. "I am sorry. I overstepped. But I am right." He turned to leave, then paused, looking at the complex, multi-pronged imperial power conduit on her study wall. He gestured to it. You know, you are a 5-prong, high-yield, imperial-grade socket. You run cold, and you power 1,000 systems at once. Seraphine just stared at him, confused by the sudden shift. Aaron said, tapping his own chest, am a 3-prong, grounded, human plug. I am outdated. I only do one thing, but I know what to do when the power surges. We do not fit, Empress, but we are both just trying to keep the lights on. He gave a small, tired nod and walked to the door. He was halfway through it when he heard a sound. It was not a gasp. It was a sharp, strangled choke. He turned back. Empress Seraphine Kale had her hand pressed to her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. It took him a second to realize she was not crying. She was laughing. It was a rusty, unfamiliar, and utterly genuine laugh. She composed herself almost immediately, but her eyes were bright, the ice in them cracked. A 3-prong plug, she asked, her voice unsteady. Grounded, Aaron confirmed, allowing a small, weary smile. And reliable. Good night, Your Majesty. He walked back to his quarters, leaving her alone in her study. The dynamic between them had irrevocably shifted. He chose a route through the lower access corridors, needing the familiar thrum of the spire's guts to clear his head. He was moving through a dark, vaulted service tunnel when the lights flickered, sputtered, and died. A deep, hydraulic thud echoed down the hall. The vacuum seals. He was trapped. Red emergency lighting pulsed, casting long, bloody shadows. Well, Aaron muttered to himself, this is predictable. 5 figures emerged from the shadows. They were not sentinels. They were encased in sleek, black, non-reflective combat armor, their visors opaque. They carried compact pulse rifles. The custodian, the lead figure's synthesized voice rasped. You will come with us, alive. I am flattered, boys, Aaron said, his knuckles white on the handle of his mop. But I have kids to put to bed. Drop the cleaning implement, the leader ordered, raising his rifle. I do not think so. The first 2 moved, fast and silent. They were military. Aaron was not. He was an engineer. He did not fight people. He fought systems. He did not swing the mop like a staff. He slammed the heavy, industrial-grade base flat onto the metal floor plate. He twisted the handle, engaging not the nanite pump, but the high-torque magnetic driver he used for aligning loose floor panels. He sent a focused, lateral pulse sideways along the maglev guide strip embedded in the floor. The effect was instantaneous. The attacker's armored boots, designed to magnetize to bulkhead for zero-gravity combat, clamped violently to the guide strip. They were stuck. The leader cursed, stumbling, trying to lift his heavy boot. He has locked us down. They raised their rifles, but they were trapped. Awkward targets. Aaron did not wait. He raised his mop high and slammed the handle, hard, into the fire suppression panel on the wall. The glass shattered. Alarms blared. Warning, the spire's voice announced. Fire suppression activated. Sealing nozzles hissed. Not water, not gas. A thick, white, high-density foam designed to smother reactor fires erupted into the corridor. It expanded with terrifying speed. In 3 seconds, the corridor was filled, floor to ceiling, with a mountain of disorienting, suffocating bubbles. The attackers were blinded, their rifles useless, their voices choking as the foam clogged their visor intakes. And they were still stuck to the floor. Aaron held his breath. He knew this system. He knew it had a 30-second oxygen displacement window. He dropped to his hands and knees, crawling under the main billow of the foam, following the wall to the manual override for the vacuum seal. He slapped the release panel, and the door, at the end of the corridor, hissed open. just as Captain Nix Arden and a squad of Royal Sentinels skidded around the corner, weapons raised. They stopped, confronted by a silent, 20-foot-high wall of white foam. Aaron crawled out, wiping a dollop of foam from his face. He stood up and gestured back at the corridor, where the sounds of muffled choking and clanging boots could be heard. "They slipped," Aaron said breathlessly. "Floor is a hazard." Nix Arden stared at him, then at the foam. She keyed her comm. "Get a cleanup crew. And breathing gear. We have 5. She turned to Aaron, a look of profound disbelief on her face. "Mop," she said, as if it were the only word she could think of. They got one of the attackers back to the command center. He was not one of the 4 stuck to the floor. He was a 5th, a lookout, whom Nix herself had tackled in the adjoining corridor. He was unmasked, a human. His eyes were wide, but utterly blank. "He is no good," Nix said in disgust, after a 10-minute interrogation. "His mind is wiped. A synaptic block. He is a puppet." "Wait," Aaron said, leaning in. The man's armor was still warm. "He is running tech. He has a data buffer. It must have been receiving orders." Nix's techs pulled the buffer and slapped it into a diagnostic cradle. The encryption was thick, but Aaron recognized the structure. "That is Chalice order encryption. Same as the loop in the engine." "Can you break it?" "I do not need to. Look at the packet data, the routing information." Aaron pointed to the screen. "It is a mission directive. Secure the asset. That is me. They wanted me alive. But look at the authorization key. The signature. It was not a name. It was a code name. Glass Regent." Nix Arden's blood ran cold. "Glass Regent," she repeated. "Theros Vale. He always wears that optic crystal signet ring. He prides himself on his transparent logic. It is him." "He wanted me," Aaron said, the pieces clicking into place. "Why, to stop me from helping Seraphine? Or to force me to help him? He knows I can hear the engine." An aide suddenly ran into the room. "Captain, an urgent announcement from the High Regent's office. He has moved the Sea of Moons ceremony. It is no longer next week. It is tomorrow night." Nix and Aaron looked at each other. "He knows," Nix said. "He knows we are onto him. He is accelerating the plan." "The Sea of Moons," Aaron said, his mind racing. "What is it?" "A celebration of the Crown engine," Nix explained, her face grim. "The Empress and the High Council perform a symbolic sync with the engine. The entire Spire's energy grid is diverted to create a light display across the planet. For 10 minutes, the entire system is open, running at absolute peak capacity." "It is the perfect time to strike," Aaron said. "He is not just setting a trap. He is using the Empress's own ceremony to hijack the entire Spire. And he has the heirs as his insurance policy." Aaron ran back to his rooms. He burst through the door. Nova was on the floor, asleep, her head pillowed on her deck of cards. He gently shook her awake. "Nova Bug, get your bag. We have to go." Nova rubbed her eyes, confused. "Go where, Dad? What is wrong?" "We are leaving," he said, throwing her few possessions into her bag. "Right now. We are going back to the maintenance stratum." "Back to our bunk. It is not safe here." Nova was suddenly wide awake. She looked at his face, at the desperation there. "Because of the men in black armor." "Yes, because of them." "What about Astra and Mira?" she asked, her voice small. "The Empress and Captain Nix will protect them. They have guards." Nova stood up and clutched her deck of cards to her chest. "But they do not have you, Dad, and they do not have me. They are scared." "Nova, this is not a game. This is real. These people are dangerous." "I know," she said, and her voice was suddenly as firm as his. "Astra pretends she is not, but she is terrified of the dark. And Mira hears the song all the time now. She says it is too loud, and it hurts her head. They need us. Aaron stopped packing. He looked at his 10-year-old daughter, who was staring him down with the moral certainty of an ancient judge. "You cannot run, Dad," she whispered. "You told me the story. You are the screw. You are the one who has to hold on when everything is shaking. You cannot just wobble out." He stared at her, his heart breaking with pride and fear. He had fled his old life, his identity, to protect her. And now, that same protective instinct, mirrored in his daughter, was the very thing anchoring him in place. He knelt and pulled her into a fierce hug. "Okay, Bug. We stay. We hold on." Seraphine's study was now a war room. Nyx was coordinating security deployments. "He has made his move," Seraphine said the moment Aaron entered. "He has forced my hand." "The attack on me confirms it," Aaron said. "He is rogue. Theros is the Glass Regent. He is Chalice Order." "He moves at the Sea of Moons ceremony," Nyx said. Her voice clipped. "We must arrest him now. Publicly." "No," Seraphine said. Nyx and Aaron both stared at her. "He is the High Regent," Seraphine continued, her voice like ice. "We have no public proof. A code name. A failed kidnapping. He will say I staged it. He will paint me as a tyrant, paranoid and unstable. An open arrest, right now, would shatter the Aurelian bloc. It would be civil war." "So you are just going to let him win?" Aaron demanded. "No," Seraphine said. "We are going to let him act. He will spring his trap at the ceremony, in front of the entire council. And we will be waiting. Nyx, you will lock down the engine core. I will counter his political move in the council. We will catch him in his own net." "And the twins?" Aaron asked, his voice deathly quiet. "What about the twins? They are his hostages. He has a key in their heads." Seraphine's face hardened. That was the variable she could not control, the one flaw in her logic. "Then I will handle the twins," Aaron said, making the decision. "I am their custodian. I will not leave their side. But I need authority. Empress. Real authority. Your tutors. Your attendants. Your protocol droids. They just get in the way. I need to be able to move." Seraphine looked at him for a long, calculating moment. The janitor, the three-prong plug, the only part of her plan that was not logical. "Very well," she declared. "As of this moment, I am invoking Imperial Emergency Privilege. Mr. Aaron Hale is granted temporary, full custodial authority over the Imperial heirs. His word regarding their safety and movement is law. It supersedes all court protocol. Not even the High Regent may override it." Nyx Arden looked stunned. "Majesty, the court, they will explode." "Let them," Seraphine said. The news hit the Vesper Spire's internal networks like a plasma bomb. A human, a janitor, given executive authority over the sacred Imperial heirs. In the highborn lounges and the diplomatic suites, the Xylos ministers and the Vosk dignitaries were appalled. It was an outrage. It was unclean. The human stratum, the dirt under their feet, was now defiling the throne itself. High Regent Theros Vale, hearing the news in his private chambers, simply smiled. The Empress was isolating herself, surrounding herself with emotional, illogical pets. She was making it easy for him. The trap was set. The board was clear, and tomorrow, at the Sea of Moons, he would checkmate the Empress, the janitor, and the entire Aurelian bloc. The grand celestial nave was a void. Its ceiling was a single, uninterrupted sheet of crystal, staring into the abyss. Tonight, that abyss stared back, filled with the ceremonial light fleet of the Aurelian bloc. It was the Sea of Moons. The night the Vesper Spire celebrated its own nervous system, the crown engine. Billions of microstructures, energized nanites, and autonomous drones, all orchestrated by the engine, performed a silent ballet in the vacuum beyond the glass. They swirled into dazzling constellations, pulsed in perfect harmony, and formed great, shimmering spheres of light, the moons of the ceremony. Down in the nave, the court was assembled. It was a glittering, tense affair. Dignitaries from 100 worlds mingled, their finery a sharp contrast to the cold, hard vacuum outside. The air hummed, not just with the spire's power, but with rumor. Aaron Hale stood near the reinforced bulkhead, a gray human smudge in a sea of silk and crystalline armor. He wore his janitor's jumpsuit, scrubbed clean, but utterly defiant. His mop leaned against the wall beside him, a silent protest that had half the court clutching their jewels in offense. He was not there as a guest. He was there as a guardian. Nova stood on his left, clutching his hand, her eyes wide with the spectacle. On his right, Princess Astra and Princess Mira stood in identical white ceremonial gowns. They looked small and severe, but they pointedly stood closer to Aaron than to their own royal tutors. "He is polluting the air," a Vosk dignitary, his face a mask of sculpted bone, hissed to his companion. "The Empress has lost her mind, allowing a maintenance human to touch the airs at the sacred sink." Aaron ignored him. He was not listening to the court. He was listening to the spire. The glitch song, the parasitic loop he had discovered, was louder tonight. It was a discordant, high-pitched whine underneath the booming ceremonial music. The crown engine was not just displaying its power. It was being forced to, like an animal whipped into performing. It was strained to the breaking point. Captain Nyx Arden, clad in her black and silver dress uniform, stood 10 paces away, her eyes scanning the crowd, her hand never straying from the sidearm she was not supposed to be wearing. Her face was a mask of cold fury. She knew, as Aaron did, that this ceremony was a trap. "All rise for the Empress," a herald announced. Empress Seraphine Kale entered. She was magnificent, encased in a gown of woven light that seemed to dim the room. But her face was pale, and her eyes, sweeping the room, found Aaron's for one brief, desperate second. "Be ready." She did not join the crowd. She ascended the central dais to the ceremonial chamber, a transparent cylinder of armored glass in the center of the nave. This was where the symbolic sync occurred, where the Empress would commune with the crown engine, her biosignature reaffirming her right to rule. High Regent Theros Vale stood at the base of the dais, his hands on the master console, a serene, proprietary smile on his thin face. "Let the Sea of Moons begin," Theros declared. He activated the sequence. The effect was instantaneous. The music did not just stop. It fractured, ending in a deafening digital scream. The billions of nanites outside the window, the beautiful shimmering moons, all flashed a blinding, sickening crimson. Then, they froze. Inside the nave, the lights did not go out. They stuttered, pulsed, and locked onto a dim, humming emergency frequency. The air circulation fans whined and fell silent. The spire's lungs had just seized. "Alert!" a synthetic voice slurred, the glitch song now dominant. "Crown engine, crown engine, crown engine. Recursive, recursive. Save. Mode. Act activated." The recursive save loop that Theros had planted was now in full control. The engine was no longer running the spire. It was trapped, trying to save itself from a phantom threat, endlessly, consuming every processor cycle. "What is happening?" a Xylos minister shrieked, his skin fading to a pale, terrified gray. "Treason!" Nyx Arden roared, drawing her weapon. It was the signal. The crowd panicked, surging toward the exits, which had all slammed shut. But the royal sentinels, the polished white guards ringing the room, did not move to control the crowd. Instead, 10 of them turned. They raised their weapons, not at the crowd, but at Nyx. "Fake sentinels," Nyx yelled, firing a warning shot that exploded against the chest of one. The armor was black composite, overlaid with stolen white plating. It was Theros' Black Ops team. "This is a security lockdown," the lead fake sentinel announced. His voice the same synthesized rasp Aaron remembered from the corridor. "By order of the High Regent, all systems are under his protective authority until the crisis is resolved." On the dais, the glass of Seraphine's chamber turned opaque, a sheet of mirrored black. She was trapped, cut off from everything. "The heirs," Aaron yelled, grabbing his children. He shoved Nova, Astra, and Mira behind him, backing against the bulkhead. Nyx and her 4 loyal sentinels were already engaged. A brutal, close-quarters firefight erupting in the opulent nave. Plasma bolts seared silk tapestries. "Get the children!" the Black Ops commander shrieked. A second squad of fake sentinels broke from the chaos, ignoring the firefight, their objective clear. They moved on Aaron. "Astra, Mira, Nova, hold onto my belt. Do not let go," Aaron ordered. He grabbed his mop, his only weapon. The commander raised his rifle. "Custodian, release the heirs. They are being moved to a secure—" Aaron did not let him finish. He swung the mop not at the man, but at the wall panel beside him. He jammed the handle into the emergency cooling port and triggered the high-pressure nanite pump. A pressurized jet of silvery fluid shot out, hitting the commander in the chest. It was not a weapon. It was just a very cold, very slippery cleaning solution. The commander slipped, crashing hard onto the obsidian floor, his helmet clanging. "Go, go now!" Aaron bellowed. He pushed the 3 girls toward a service corridor, Nyx and her team providing covering fire behind them. But the Black Ops soldiers were disciplined. They recovered, ignoring the firefight, and pursued their primary objective, the heirs. They herded Aaron and the children away from the main exits, away from Nyx, down a long, white, sterile corridor. "He is pushing us," Aaron panted, his mind racing. "This is not a chase. He is directing us." A heavy blast door slammed shut behind them, cutting them off from Nyx. Another slammed shut ahead. They were trapped. The commander, his armor dripping with nanite fluid, advanced slowly, his squad fanning out. The janitor is clever, but he is still just a janitor. The princesses will come with us. The regent's plan requires their cooperation. "Where are you taking them?" Aaron demanded, his mop held like a quarterstaff, the 3 terrified children hiding behind him. "To the neuro-imprinting chamber," the commander said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Their loyalty requires realignment. The Empress has proven to be an unfit mother. The Glass Regent will provide a more logical administrative core. They were going to wipe their minds. They were going to rewrite them." A side door hissed open. In here, it was Nyx Arden. She was bleeding from a shallow plasma burn on her arm. But she was there. She must have known the same service routes he did. "He has locked the whole sector down," Nyx said, pulling them into a dark junction. "We cannot get back to the Empress." "We do not need to," Aaron said, his voice grim. "We need to get to the imprinting chamber first." "It is 3 rings in," Nyx said. "We are cut off by 5 high-security checkpoints. We will never make it." Aaron looked at the maintenance panel on the wall, his hand hovering over it. The spire was still groaning, the air dead and getting thinner. He could feel the sick, looping pulse of the engine. It was in agony. "The engine is trapped in a loop," Aaron said, thinking aloud. "It is not thinking. It is just reacting. Maybe I can use that." He placed his palms flat on the panel, closing his eyes. He was not a hacker. He was a listener. He felt the parasitic code, the save command that Theros had unleashed. "Nyx, get ready to run. I am going to make a door. That bulkhead is 3-inch thick titanium. Hale, you cannot. I am not opening the door, Aaron said through gritted teeth. I am going to move the vacuum. He plunged his consciousness into the machine's panic. He did not fight the loop. He added to it. He sent a single, false echo. Containment breach. Sector Gamma. Containment breach. The panicking engine reacted instantly. The heavy bulkhead door in front of them screamed as the seals were vacuum-locked. But the door behind them, the one leading back to the Black Ops team, hissed open. Then, the Spire's emergency atmospheric system, the one part of the engine Theros was not suppressing, tried to compensate. It sucked the air out of the corridor, creating a hurricane-force wind that pulled them backward, away from the soldiers. "Hold on!" Aaron yelled, grabbing the girls. The Black Ops team was pulled off their feet, sucked back into the nave. Aaron grabbed a wall conduit, his muscles screaming, the children clinging to him, as the wind roared past. Then he sent a new command. "Seal! Seal! Seal!" The door behind them slammed shut. The vacuum equalized. They were safe for a second. "What in the void was that?" Nyx panted, her eyes wide. "I made a suggestion, and the engine panicked," Aaron said. "Let's go." They ran, using Aaron's new, terrifying ability to nudge the sick engine. He did not open locks. He created localized containment failures, forcing the Spire to open and close doors, to suck them through corridors with sudden, violent gusts of wind, or to trap enemies behind vacuum seals. It was like riding the back of a dying, thrashing whale. But it was working. They reached the neuro-imprinting sector. It was a sterile, white, medical wing. In the central chamber, through a thick glass window, they saw it. 2 Black Ops technicians were strapping a weeping, terrified Mira into the large, menacing chair. Astra was fighting 2 other guards, kicking and biting. "Get off me, get off her." The Black Ops commander was there, overseeing it. "Hold the girl still. The Regent wants this done before he secures the Empress. Begin the sequence." Nyx raised her rifle and fired at the window. The bolt sparked and dissipated. "Glass, shielded. We have to go through the door." She kicked open the door. "By the authority of the Empress, stand down." The commander turned, unfazed. "Captain Arden, you are relieved of duty. Killer, secure the janitor. He is the failsafe." The guards in the room, 5 of them, raised their weapons. It was a standoff. Aaron looked at the room. It was a medical clean room. He saw the ceiling nozzles. He saw the atmospheric control port right next to the door. He had a terrible, brilliant idea. He stepped in front of Nyx. "Gentlemen," he said, breathing hard. "My apologies. I am the custodian for this sector." The commander stared at him. "What?" "I just waxed this floor, and I am afraid," Aaron said, his eyes crinkling in a pained smile. "It is dangerously slippery. I really must apologize in advance for my shoddy work." He jammed the nozzle of his mop into the atmospheric port, twisted the handle, and shouted, "Biohazard protocol sterilization foam full flood." He emptied his entire, custom-mixed nanite cartridge into the room's ventilation system. It was not the light, airy foam from the corridor. This was a high-density, high-adhesion, biological containment foam. It erupted from the ceiling nozzles in thick, sticky, white gobs. The guards, caught completely by surprise, slipped, their boots finding no purchase. They fell, firing their weapons into the ceiling as they went down. The foam expanded, covering them in seconds. It clogged their visors, gummed their joints, and smothered their rifles. "It is sticky," one yelled, trying to get up, only to be buried by another wave of white bubbles. Nyx and her 2 remaining sentinels moved in, kicking weapons away from the trapped, flailing soldiers and slapping stun cuffs on them. Aaron ran to the chair, ripping the neural interface from Mira's head. He pulled her into his arms. Astra, who was covered in the foam, just stared at the chaos, at the men trapped like flies in amber. She looked at her sister, then at Aaron, and a small, shaky laugh escaped her. "See, Mira," Astra said, wiping foam from her face. "He told them the floor was slippery," Mira, held tight in Aaron's arms, let out a watery, hysterical giggle. The tension snapped, but the spire was still dying. The air was getting thin, tasting of burnt metal. A new voice echoed in the room. Theros Vale. His face appeared on a nearby monitor, magnified and triumphant. He was not speaking to them. He was speaking to Seraphine. "A pity, Empress," Theros's voice boomed, broadcast now throughout the whole wing. "You are sealed in your little glass box. The crown engine is in full, irreversible collapse. Your guards are occupied, and I have your daughters." "He thinks we are his team," Nyx whispered, cuffing the last guard. "Sign the transfer, Seraphine," Theros commanded. "Sign over the engine to me, and I will be merciful. I will stabilize the spire. I will even let you live. Refuse, and I will simply let the air scrubbers fail, one by one. I will start with the human stratum. Of course, a fitting end. Your sentimentality will be what suffocates your pets." Aaron felt a cold dread. He looked at Nyx. He is winning. Seraphine is trapped. He is killing the spire to get her to sign. "We cannot stop the loop from here," Nyx said, her voice desperate. "It is in the core." "We do not stop the loop," Aaron said, his face hardening as the impossible choice settled on him. He looked at Nova, at Astra, at Mira. "We just have to outlast it. He is letting the engine bleed out. I am going to pull the plug." "Hale, what are you talking about?" "A controlled crash," Aaron said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He ran out of the imprinting room, back into the dark service junction. "He is running a parasitic program. I am going to trigger a full core shutdown, a hard reboot." "You cannot," Nyx yelled, following him. "That will kill everything. All automated systems. Life support. The whole spire goes dark." "Yes," Aaron agreed, ripping a massive maintenance panel from the wall, revealing a tangle of ancient, thick, insulated cables. "It will go dark for about 5 minutes. But Theros's loop cannot survive a full reboot. It will be wiped." "We will be dead in 5 minutes," Nova screamed, tears in her eyes. "We will not be able to breathe." "Yes, you will," Aaron panted, pulling at the cables. This was his turf. This was the knowledge no one else had. The Vesper Spire is a fancy new palace built on top of a rusty old freighter station. They did not rip out the old pipes. They just built around them. He was not looking at fiber optics. He was looking at massive, mechanical, hydraulic levers. The ancient, purely analog atmospheric manifold. "They use this for emergency coolant venting," Aaron grunted, putting his shoulder to a giant, rust-red wheel. "But it is still connected. It is a mechanical breathing valve. It does not need the engine. It just needs a janitor." "Aaron, do not," Nyx pleaded. "Hold your breath," he yelled. He grabbed the 2 main power conduits and slammed them together. The universe ended. The dim emergency lights. The monitor with Theros's face. The alarms. The hum. Everything went silent. Total darkness. Total silence. The only sound was the panicked gasping of the people in the corridor. For a second, there was nothing. Then, with a deafening, shuddering groan, the mechanical age reasserted itself. A massive hisses echoed through the spire, from grates in the floor and vents in the ceiling. Cold, stale, oily air blasted into the corridor. It was the reserve air from the old freighter tanks. It was not clean. It was not pleasant. But it was air. The entire Vesper spire, dark and silent, took a single, shuddering, mechanical breath. In the imprinting room, the Black Ops commander, the only one who had managed to free himself from the foam, had staggered to his feet. He had lost his rifle, but he had a plasma pistol in his boot. He raised it, his hand shaking, not at Aaron or Nyx, but at Mira. The Regent will win. He was a zealot, ready to die for his cause. Aaron was too far away. Nyx was outside. Mira, who had been set down by Aaron, stepped forward. The spire was dark, but the biosynaptic fibers that ran the imprinting chair, the ones connected to the crown engine, were flickering with reboot static. They were confused, leaderless, writhing in the dark. The commander leveled his pistol. "No," Mira said. It was not a child's plea. It was a command. Her voice, echoing in the dark room, had a strange, harmonic resonance. It was the same frequency as Aaron's voice when he spoke to the engine. The commander paused, confused. "You are not allowed," Mira whispered, her small body shaking, not with fear, but with a sudden, terrible power. "He is. Listen. You have to listen. Listen to him." She was not pointing at the commander. She was pointing at Aaron, who stood silhouetted in the doorway. The flickering, leaderless biofibers in the room suddenly snapped taut. They sensed her command, her harmonic, her lineage. They lashed out from the chair, from the walls, not at the commander, but at his pistol. The fibers wrapped around his hand, his arm, his chest, encasing him in a glowing, bioluminescent cocoon, tighter and tighter, until the pistol clattered from his paralyzed fingers. The commander stared, his eyes wide in terror, as the machine itself, the biotech of the spire, held him immobile. Nyx Arden lowered her weapon, stunned. Aaron Hale stared at Mira, the girl who had just commanded the spire's infrastructure, the girl who had just, instinctively, pointed at him as the new source of authority. The spire was breathing, the children were safe, and the entire game had just changed. The Vesper spire was silent, holding its single, mechanical breath. In the darkness of the service junction, the only light came from the bioluminescent fibers that had cocooned the Black Ops commander, pulsing faintly in time with Mira's terrified heartbeat. The 5-minute hard reboot was underway. The crown engine was dark, its parasitic loop wiped clean. "He lost it," Aaron Hale said, his voice echoing in the stale, oily air. "Theros lost his program. He will be at the core chamber. He will be trying a manual rewrite." "We cannot go there," Captain Nyx Arden said. Her voice strained. She was checking her sidearm, which was now just a useless piece of metal. "The core chamber is the most secure point on the spire, and he will have his personal guard." "They have projectile weapons," Aaron stated, hefting his mop. "We have a blunt object and 3 scared kids. I like those odds." "Dad, you are not funny," Nova whispered, clinging to his jumpsuit. "I am a little funny," Aaron insisted. "Now move. We have maybe 3 minutes before the power comes back on, and he tries to lock us out." They ran. They plunged through the dark, silent arteries of the spire, a strange, desperate family. Aaron led the way, his hand on the wall, feeling the vibrations of the ancient, mechanical lungs he had woken. Behind him, Nyx herded the children Nova, brave and silent, Astra, furious and defiant, and Mira, who was holding onto Aaron's belt, her eyes wide, sensing the massive, wounded machine sleeping all around them. Dim. Amber emergency lights flickered to life, casting long, uncertain shadows. The reboot was ending. The spire was waking up. The core chamber was not a room of servers. It was a cathedral. It was a vast, spherical void. And in its center hung the crown engine, a pulsating, biological star of glowing, crystalline nerves and living, synaptic cables. The chamber walls themselves were woven from these living fibers, and tonight, they were all glowing a furious, unstable, blood red. In the very center of the chamber, suspended in the air, was the ceremonial chamber, the transparent cylinder that held the Empress. Seraphine was trapped inside, a prisoner in her own glass box. Below it, on the main console bridge, stood High Regent Theros Vale. He was flanked by 6 guards in the jet-black armor of the Chalice Order. He was working furiously at the console, his fingers flying, trying to force a new code into the vulnerable, rebooting engine. "Too late, Janitor," Theros yelled, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. He did not turn. He knew they were there. "Your pathetic mechanical trick only delayed the inevitable." Nyx raised her useless plasma pistol. "Theros, stand down. You are." "I am the new logic," Theros roared, turning. His face was a mask of ecstatic madness. "The engine is clean. Yes, clean of her weakness. It is ready to accept a new, logical master." He gestured to the glass cylinder. Seraphine was inside, her hands pressed against the glass, her face pale but resolute. "She is sealed by the Imperial Blood Code," Theros explained, savoring his triumph. "The only way to transfer authority is for her to cede it, or for her bloodline to end. And she is refusing to speak. But it does not matter. I am using her proximity, her very presence, to force a new key." He sneered at Aaron. "A janitor. You cannot possibly comprehend the complexities of royal authority. You came all this way to die at the feet of a new age." "You are right," Aaron said, walking slowly forward. The children stayed behind him, shielded by Nyx. "I do not understand royal authority at all." He stopped at the edge of the console, his mop held loosely in his left hand. "I am not here to fight for the throne, Theros," Aaron said, his voice calm and clear in the pulsing red room. "I am here to fix the throne's breathing tubes, and you are choking them." Theros laughed, a high, thin sound. "You cannot fix this. The blood code is absolute. It listens only to her, and I have locked it against her. It is a perfect trap. She cannot authorize a transfer, and she cannot unlock herself. It is waiting for a command she cannot give." Aaron looked at the console. He saw the complex, swirling biologarithms. He saw the red denied message flashing over and over. Theros was right. It was a perfect logic loop. Then Aaron looked at Mira. He looked at Astra. He looked at Seraphine, trapped behind the glass. And he looked at Nova, standing beside them. Logic, bloodlines, authority. "You made a mistake, Theros," Aaron said quietly. "I have made no mistakes," Theros spat. "You did," Aaron insisted. "You taught the Spire to listen to new voices. You programmed an override to make the princesses obey you. You introduced a new variable. But then Mira, she taught the Spire to listen to me." He turned to the children. "He is wrong. The system is not locked. It is just confused. It is listening for a mother, but it is hearing a dozen different commands. We just need to be clearer." He looked at Seraphine, locking eyes with her through the armored glass. "Empress, I need your voice. Yell at him. Tell him he is fired." Seraphine understood instantly. She slammed her palm flat against the glass. Her voice, muffled but clear, ringing with pure, cold fury. "Theros Vale, by the Imperial mandate, you are relieved of your station. I am the Empress." The denied sign on the console flickered. Theros's smile faltered. "What is this?" "Astra," Aaron yelled, pointing at the High Regent. "You know how you get when you do not get dessert, that voice. Give it to him. Astra, shaking with adrenaline, stepped forward. You let our mother go. You are a bad man and you smell like old shoes. The console flashed, querying. Mira, Aaron called. The song the engine was singing. The one that was wrong. Sing it right. Mira, terrified, looked at the red, angry fibers. She closed her eyes. She did not sing. She hummed. It was a clear, pure, perfect tone. A harmonic chord that resonated with the rebooting engine. The angry red light in the room softened, shifting slightly toward blue. The console beeped. Lineage, confirmed. Awaiting. Key. It needs a key, Theros shrieked, realizing what was happening. It still needs the Imperial biocode. It does not, Aaron said. He looked at his own daughter. Nova. Tell them who we are. Nova stepped out from behind Nyx. She looked at the console, at the trapped Empress, and at Theros. Her voice did not shake. You leave our family alone, family. The word hit the console. Key. Accepted. Aaron did not wait. He jammed the handle of his mop into the console's main data port. He was not hacking. He was mixing. He routed the 4 distinct audio signals through his mop's diagnostic system, Seraphine's command, Astra's defiance, Mira's harmony, and Nova's love, a family chorus. The blood code was designed for one Imperial voice. It was now receiving a data set it had never anticipated a mother, her biological children, and the human father who had anchored them all. It was not the letter of the law. It was the spirit. It was lineage. It was protection. It was family. The console chimed, a high, clear, beautiful note. Authority. Recognized. The blood code lock vaporized. The black glass of the ceremonial chamber cleared. The cylinder door hissed open. Seraphine was free. For a single second, the chamber was silent. Theros stared, his face a mask of disbelief. He had lost. If I cannot have it, he snarled, his logic breaking. No one will. He ripped a compact, black weapon from his robes, a personal energy disruptor. He was fast. But Aaron was an engineer. The core chamber was alive, rebooting, pulsing with raw, unshielded energy. The living fibers all around them were sparking with static discharge. Aaron did not hesitate. He swung his mop, not at Theros, but at a thick, sparking fiber hanging from the ceiling. He brought the metal handle close. The static electricity arced, crackling, turning the simple metal shaft into a makeshift lightning rod. The mop handle sizzled, glowing white with contained energy. Before Theros could aim, Aaron completed the swing. It was not a clumsy, desperate blow. It was a precise, elegant tap, like a conductor's baton. The supercharged metal handle of the mop connected with the high-tech disruptor. Physics 1. The disruptor, overloaded with a raw, primal energy it was never designed to handle, exploded in Theros' hand. He screamed, a high, thin sound of agony, as he stumbled back, clutching the smoking, ruined remains of his right hand. At that exact moment, the main doors to the core chamber blasted open. Captain Nyx Arden, her real, loyal sentinels in polished white armor, flooding in behind her, leveled their projectile rifles. High Regent Theros Vale, Nyx roared. You are under arrest for high treason against the crown. The sentinels swarmed Theros, cuffing him, their weapons trained on his remaining Black Ops guards, who immediately dropped their arms. It was over. Seraphine stepped down from the dais. Her face was not cold. It was not pragmatic. It was a landscape of pure, Arctic fury. She strode past Aaron, past her children, and stopped directly in front of the captured, weeping High Regent. She did not speak. She simply reached out and ripped the glittering silver insignia of the High Regent from his robes, tearing the fabric. You are nothing, she whispered, her voice shaking with rage. You are banished. You are unmade. Theros looked up, his face slick with tears and sweat, and he began to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling, horrifying sound. You think this was the only plan, he choked out. You think the Chalice Order relies on one loop? You think the imprinting chamber was the only fail-safe? A cold dread settled in Aaron's stomach. Theros looked past Seraphine, past Aaron, his gaze fixing on the children. I seeded the entire nanite fabrication line. Empress, he hissed. Right under the residential wing. Right under your precious pets. A dead man's switch. You cannot stop it. He coughed, spitting blood, and screamed a single, guttural word. A word in a language that had been dead for 1,000 years. A command. Instantly, alarms blared. Not the digital scream of the engine, but a loud, clanging, physical alarm. A guard at a console yelled, Empress, it is the residential wing, the nanite lines. They are overloading a full-scale detonation. He triggered a chain reaction. They were in the core chamber. The residential wing was half the spire away. But Aaron was already moving, vaulting over the console to where Theros had been standing. The board was flashing red, a massive, spiking energy signature. A runaway reaction. I cannot stop the command, Aaron yelled, his hands flying over the new controls. The controls he now understood. The sequence is locked, but I can redirect the blast. I can ground it. Where? Nyx demanded, herding the children back. Vent it to space. The vents are locked, Aaron shouted, his eyes scanning the schematic. The overload is too big. It needs a ground, a massive, biological ground, something to absorb the synaptic shock. His eyes widened. He knew. He knew what he had to do. He looked at Nova. Nova bug, he said, his voice suddenly very soft. She froze. Dad, I need you to go with Captain Nyx, right now. No, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. No, Dad, you cannot. I love you, he said. He grabbed her, kissed her hard on the forehead, and shoved her into Nyx's arms. Get them out of here, get them safe. That is an order. Before Nyx could protest, before Seraphine could speak, Aaron turned back to the console. The energy cascade was seconds from detonation. A waterfall of pure, crimson, destructive energy was spiking on the board. He could not stop it, but he could become the path. He looked at the main power junction, the nexus, where all the core's energy converged before being distributed. The overload was surging toward it. He needed a conduit. He grabbed his mop. Aaron! No, Seraphine screamed, realizing his intent. He jammed the metal handle deep into the heart of the overload junction. The energy, seeking the path of least resistance, found him. He screamed. It was not a human sound. It was the sound of a star being born, the sound of a soul being vaporized. He was engulfed in white-hot, blinding light. The entire nanite pulse, an energy surge designed to blow a hole in the spire's hull, was channeling up the mop and into his body. His right arm, his right side. The arm holding his tool, vanished in a flash of plasma. His jumpsuit incinerated. His skin blackened and cracked. He was a human lightning rod, a biological ground. He was saving his daughter. He was saving the spire. The pulse was too much. It was frying him. But it was also creating a massive feedback loop, a backlash of raw power arcing from the junction, threatening to destroy the core itself. A secondary wave of energy, a violent, kinetic blast, erupted from the console, aimed directly at Aaron's burning, convulsing back. Seraphine moved. She did not calculate. She did not hesitate. She did not rule. She reacted. She leaped forward, grabbing the heavy, discarded chest plate from a fallen Chalice Order guard. She shoved herself between the feedback pulse and Aaron's body, bracing for impact. The wave hit the shield with the force of a battering ram, slamming her into the console, throwing her to the ground. The overload stopped. The red lights died. The alarms fell silent. The crown engine, free of the loop, free of the overload, pulsed once. A soft, gentle, stable blue. In the sudden, profound silence, the Vesper Spire took its first clean, pure, living breath. Aaron Hale collapsed, his body smoking. He was still conscious, his eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. His right arm was gone, replaced by a charred, smoking ruin. The mop, its metal handle melted into a slag of molten metal, clattered to the floor beside him. "Dad!" Nova shrieked, breaking free from Nix and sliding across the floor to his side. Seraphine pushed herself to her feet, bruised, her gown of light torn and scorched. She ignored her own pain, rushing to her knees beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Nix Arden, her face grim, checked her console. "The engine is stable, all sectors, green." She looked at the platform where Theros had been cuffed. The sentinels were unconscious, stunned by the feedback. Theros himself was gone. "He is gone," Nix whispered in disbelief. "In the chaos of the pulse. He escaped custody." Seraphine did not hear her. She was looking at Aaron's catastrophic wound, at the black, ruined flesh. She was looking at the man who had saved her children, saved her empire. "Medics," she whispered, her voice trembling. Then, the Empress vanished, replaced by a terrified, desperate woman. She looked up and roared, her voice breaking. "Medics, get me medics, now you will save him." The Imperial Medical Bay was silent, save for the rhythmic, soft chime of a biomonitor. It was a white, sterile, and agonizingly bright room. Aaron Hale woke up to the smell of antiseptic and plasma gel. It was a profound disappointment. He had, for a moment, hoped to wake up to the familiar, comforting smell of industrial solvent and his own cramped bunk in the maintenance stratum. He felt a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to emanate from his entire right side. He tried to lift his right hand. There was nothing to lift. He opened his eyes. The light was blinding. He blinked, and the world swam into focus. Empress Seraphine Kale was sitting in a simple chair beside his bed. She was not wearing her gown of light or her imperial robes. She was dressed in a simple black uniform he did not recognize. Her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She looked human. "They are safe," she said immediately, her voice low and rough. It was the first time he had heard it without the edge of command. "Nova is with the twins. They are in the gravity garden. They are playing." Aaron let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. The tension fled his body, leaving only the white-hot, echoing pain. "Good," he whispered. His throat felt like sand. He looked down, where his right arm and shoulder had been. There was now a heavy, sealed biosynthetic casing. It was packed with medical gel and glowing with a faint blue light. The wound was catastrophic, extending from his collarbone down to his hip. "It is gone," he stated. It was not a question. "You grounded the entire nanite grid," a new voice said. A royal doctor, a tall, reedy Xylos, glided into the room, checking the monitors. "The energy pulse destroyed the limb completely. It should have stopped your heart. It should have liquefied your internal organs." The doctor gestured toward Seraphine. "The Empress shielded you from the kinetic feedback. She absorbed a blow that would have killed you. Even so, the synaptic overload. It is a miracle you are conscious. Custodian." Aaron processed the new title. Custodian. He looked at Seraphine. She was pointedly examining the medical monitor, avoiding his gaze. "You saved my life," he said. It was the logical move, Seraphine replied, her voice regaining a fraction of its familiar coldness. Losing my new custodian general moments after his appointment would be inefficient. Aaron tried to smile. It felt more like a grimace. My mop, he whispered. It did not. Make it. Did it for the first time. A genuine, unguarded smile touched Seraphine's lips. The artifact has been retired, she said. With honors. It is currently being analyzed by my top engineers, who seem to believe it possesses near-mythical properties. It was a good mop, Aaron sighed, and slipped back into unconsciousness. When he woke next, it was 3 days later. The spire was stable. The grand celestial nave, the site of the failed coup, had been scrubbed clean of plasma burns and dried foam. The court was assembled, not for a celebration, but for a judgment. They stood in rigid, terrified silence. Empress Seraphine Kale stood on the dais, once again the image of imperial power. Her gown of state was pristine. Her face was cold, hard, and unforgiving. High Regent Theros Vale, she announced, her voice echoing in the vast, silent hall, is hereby declared enemy of the bloc, traitor, and heretic. He is banished, unmade, and subject to immediate execution upon capture. She paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle. The rogue organization known as the Chalice Order, which he resurrected, is to be dismantled, root, stem, and memory. Any found to have aided him, spoken his words, or known of his plan will share his fate. A full purge of the government is underway. The court shuddered. This was the Empress they knew. This failure, Seraphine continued, was not one of policy, but of trust. The Royal Guard, compromised by traitors and blinded by protocol, failed in its duty. That name no longer holds meaning. She looked to her side. Nyx Arden, her arm in a formal black sling, stepped forward. Captain Nyx Arden, Seraphine declared, is hereby promoted. She will no longer lead the Royal Guard. That name implies a static, defensive posture. She will command the new Praetor Guard. Her mandate is not to protect. It is to hunt. She will restore the trust this traitor shattered. She will find him. Nyx, her face carved from granite, executed a flawless salute. It will be done, Your Majesty, Seraphine nodded. But the greatest failure, she said, her voice dropping, was one of infrastructure. Not our machines, but our philosophy. We prized logic so highly that we forgot the value of simple, human, common sense. She turned, her gaze sweeping the assembled ministers, and gestured to the side of the chamber. Aaron Hale walked forward, slowly. He was out of the medical bay, his right side encased in a temporary, functional prosthetic, a simple framework of gray metal and polymer. He still wore his janitor's jumpsuit. Beside him, holding his new, artificial hand, was Nova. Astra and Mira flanked him, their expressions defiant, daring anyone in the court to challenge their presence. By imperial decree, Seraphine announced, I have created the new office of Custodian General of Living Infrastructure. This role will have supreme, binding authority over the Crown Engine, all life support, all habitat systems, and all infrastructure crews. It will answer only to me. A stunned, horrified murmur rippled through the alien dignitaries. A Cygnian dignitary, his gaseous form flickering in agitation, hissed, This is an outrage, a maintenance human. This maintenance human, Seraphine snapped, her voice cutting through the dissent, is the only reason you are breathing today. He proved his qualification not with a degree, but with his body. He is the man who held this spire together when its own logic failed. He is the screw that held the throne. His authority is absolute. The court was silent, choking on its own prejudice. And one more thing, the Empress added. Until the threat of the Chalice Order is neutralized, and given the proven biological and emotional resonance. She looked at the three children, who had formed a tight, protective triangle around Aaron. Mr. Hale is also granted full, temporary guardianship of the Imperial heirs. If the first announcement caused a ripple, this one was a tidal wave of silent, apoplectic shock. It was more than an appointment. It was an adoption. It was a statement. The human stratum, the dirt under their feet, had not just been invited into the palace. It had been given the keys to the nursery. The new structure of the Vesper Spire settled. The social fallout was immediate and chaotic. The human maintenance stratum, overnight, went from being invisible to being the Empress's chosen people. They were treated with a new, baffling, and deeply resentful respect. Aaron, meanwhile, ignored the politics. He had work to do. He found the children in the rebuilt gravity garden. The air was sweet, and the new plas crystal wall held back the void. Astra was sitting on the bioluminescent grass, scowling at Nova's feet. "This string is illogical," she complained, fumbling with the laces on Nova's sneakers. "It is inefficient. Why does it not simply listen when I tell it to form a knot?" "Because it is string, Astra," Nova said, laughing. "It cannot hear you. You have to tell it with your fingers. Look, the loop goes over, then under. You have to be smarter than the string." "I am smarter than the string," Astra insisted, her cheeks flushing. Mira, the quiet twin, was sitting nearby, her eyes closed, her face peaceful. "The engine is quiet," she whispered. "It is not singing the broken song anymore. It feels sleepy." She opened her eyes and looked at Aaron. "And it feels like you. It is warm." Aaron smiled, flexing the metal fingers of his new, rudimentary hand. He was relearning how to exist. "You know," Astra said, finally managing a lopsided, tangled knot. "You are very intelligent when it comes to knots and soap and cards, Nova. But you do not know anything about Xylo's trade routes, or the history of the first Empress." "And you," Nova shot back, "know everything about history, but you cannot make toast without setting off an alarm, and you still cannot beat me at Go Fish." "We should have a school," Mira said, her soft voice cutting through the argument. "A school for all of it, the knots and the history, the toast and the stars." Astra and Nova stopped, looking at her. "A school," Astra said, the idea taking root. "Where we teach the court children how to tie shoes. And we teach the maintenance kids how to read Xylos," Nova added, catching the fire. "The three lights," Aaron murmured, the name coming to him instantly. He looked at the three girls: Astra, the fire; Mira, the soul; Nova, the heart. The Three Lights Project, a new institute, where we learn life skills and imperial logic, together. From a high balcony, Seraphine watched them. She saw her two daughters, one bred for command, the other for empathy, planning a revolution with a janitor's child. She nodded once. It was the most logical idea she had heard all week. Aaron's first official act as custodian general was to horrify the entire engineering corps. He stood on the console bridge of the core chamber, now pulsing with a calm, healthy sapphire blue. He was surrounded by the Spire's top technocrats, all of them offering complex, multi-layered software patches to prevent another intrusion. Aaron waved his new metal hand, silencing them. "No," he said. The lead engineer, a meticulous Xylos, blinked. "Custodian General, a firewall upgrade is the only logical." "Your logic failed," Aaron said simply. "Your firewall failed. Your perfect, self-correcting system tried to kill us all. I am not interested in a smarter program. I am interested in a stupider one." He unrolled a physical schematic, a blueprint so old It was printed on actual fiber paper. Here, the old freighter station's manual manifold. I want it reactivated. I want a valve. A physical, mechanical, dumb valve. But custodian, the engineer stammered. That is a dead man's switch. It is ancient. It requires a living operator to manually reset it. Exactly, Aaron said, tapping the schematic. When the engine panics, I do not want it trying to think. I want it to stop. I want a big red wheel that a human hand has to turn. Logic is great, right up until it decides to murder you in your sleep. From now on, we are the final override. He took a roll of adhesive labels from his pocket. With his left hand, he painstakingly drew a small, crude picture. It was a simple iron screw, wearing a tiny, lopsided crown. He peeled the sticker off and slapped it onto the gleaming, modern housing of the core chamber's main console. There, he said, stepping back. Simple first, smart later. Now, if anyone gets confused, they just look for the screw. The engineering corps stared in mute horror. The highest functioning artificial intelligence in the galaxy was now being managed by a philosophy of plumbing and labeled with a cartoon. That night, Aaron stood on a private balcony overlooking the curve of Aurelian Prime. He was learning to feel the spire, not as a machine, but as a body. He felt the thrum of the engines, the clean pulse of the air, the sleepy, stable mind of the crown engine. The door behind him hissed open. He did not need to turn. He smelled her perfume, a faint, cold scent like starlight and ozone. The court is in chaos, Seraphine said. She came to stand beside him, not as an empress, but as a woman. She wore the same simple black uniform from the medical bay. You have offended every tradition I hold sacred. The Cygnian ambassador threatened to sever diplomatic ties over your appointment. I seem to be good at that, Aaron replied, not looking at her. He flexed the gray, metal fingers of his new arm. Are you here to fire me again? I am here, she said, her voice quiet. To thank you, and to apologize. The price you paid? It was too high. It was the only one I had, he said simply. And I would pay it again. They stood in silence for a long time, the void glittering beneath them. The attraction between them was no longer a question. It was a fact, a palpable, humming force in the air. The 5-prong, high-yield imperial socket, and the 3-prong, grounded, human plug. This is complicated, Seraphine said at last. You are an empress, Aaron said, ticking the points off on his new fingers. I am the custodian general, who used to be your janitor, and I am the temporary legal guardian of your children, and you saved my life, and I saved yours. Complicated does not even begin to cover it. She looked at him, and he saw that small, genuine smile again. I find myself drawn to your inefficiency, Aaron Hale. It is profoundly illogical. And I, he admitted, finally turning to look at her, am drawn to your terrifying, high-yield logic. It is the most impressive thing I have ever seen. He sighed, the cold metal of his arm clicking softly. But this, us, whatever this is, it cannot be a priority. We have a traitor to catch. We have 3 children to raise. We have an entire imperial philosophy to reboot. Seraphine nodded, her expression a complex mixture of regret and relief. You are correct. Always the pragmatist. Always, he agreed. He gave her a wry, tired grin. So, maybe we should schedule a time to discuss this in the future. She raised an eyebrow. Schedule it. Absolutely, Aaron said. I am just saying, a relationship this high stakes between a human and an empress. It is going to need a very, very detailed maintenance schedule. She laughed. The rusty, unfamiliar, beautiful sound echoed in the quiet air. I will have my scheduler contact your scheduler, Custodian General. You do that, Your Majesty, he said, turning back to the stars. The spire was healing, but the investigation had just begun. In the medical bay, the royal doctor, the same one who had first noted the imprinting phenomenon, was running a final, obsessive diagnostic. The event at the core chamber had baffled her scientific mind. The family chorus was not a recognized protocol. It should not have worked. She had the authorized genetic samples, Empress Seraphine, Princess Astra, and Princess Mira. And she had the sample from Aaron Hale, taken from his medical intake when he was admitted with his catastrophic injuries. She was running a comparative genetic code sequence. A standard compatibility test, just to satisfy her own curiosity. A red light flashed on her console. Anomaly. Impossible, she murmured, rerunning the test. At that moment, Praetor Nyx Arden entered the lab, her new black and silver uniform immaculate. Report, Doctor. I am reviewing all data logs from the attack. Was there anything else? The doctor looked up, her Xylo's face pale, her skin shimmer flickering. The imprinting, she whispered. The reason the twins responded to his voice in the nursery. The reason Mira could command the biosystems, using his harmonic signature as an authority. She brought 2 gene code strings up on the main screen. They were complex, beautiful, and swirling. One was labeled Imperial Air. The other was labeled Hale. Aaron. What am I looking at, Doctor? Nyx asked, impatient. Do not you see, the doctor said, her voice trembling. They are not identical, but they are not unrelated. Explain, in simple terms. Praetor, the doctor said, turning to face her. The family chorus worked because the Crown engine recognized it as such. It recognized them all as a biological unit. She pointed to a foundational marker, a deep code strand, present in Aaron's sample. Then, she pointed to the same, identical strand, woven into the DNA of Astra and Mira. He is not just their protector, Praetor, the doctor breathed, her mind reeling from the implication. He is compatible, on a level that should not exist. He is, by some impossible metric, biologically related. The hunt was brief, brutal, and utterly efficient. Praetor Nyx Arden, clad in her new, jet-black Praetor Guard armor, led the strike team personally. They did not announce their presence with a diplomatic request. They simply scuttled their stealth ship, blasted their way through the docking clamps of the smuggling station on the outer rim, and vented the atmosphere from the entire sector. They found Theros Vale cowering in a freighter's engine room, his fine robes replaced with a greasy mechanic's jumpsuit. He was no longer the glass regent, a picture of cold, transparent logic. He was just a man, cornered, his face smeared with coolant and terror. Nyx Arden did not raise her rifle. She simply stood in the doorway, the vacuum of the corridor hissing behind her, and waited. Theros, seeing her, seeing the end, did something unexpected. He began to laugh. It was a high, thin, cracking sound that echoed horribly in the metal room. You came all this way for me, Praetor, he choked out, his arrogance returning like a reflex. A personal visit. I am flattered. High Regent Theros Vale, Nyx stated, her voice a flat, dead monotone over her helmet speaker. You are under arrest for high treason, sedition, and the attempted murder of the imperial heirs. You have no rights. You have no name. I have a name, Theros hissed, scrambling to his feet. He was beaten, but his eyes were still bright with a zealot's fire. I am the future. You are just biology. You are meat. You cannot stop the chalice. We are logic. We are inevitable. You are a prisoner, Nyx said. She gestured, and two of her praetor guards moved in, clamping heavy magnetic cuffs on his wrists. As they dragged him toward the door, he twisted, looking at her with that same terrible, knowing smile. It does not matter. You know, I lost. But the anomaly, the human variable, he cannot possibly understand what he is. He thinks he won. Theros laughed again, that wet, gurgling sound of madness. You tell the Empress. You tell her she takes excellent care of his children. Nyx froze. The janitor. Theros shrieked, his voice breaking. The architect, the ghost. He thinks he is a screw. He is the entire machine. She chose him. She chose humanity. He dug his one, good, uncuffed hand into his jumpsuit and threw a small, black data slate at her feet. It skittered across the grimy floor. My failsafe, he screamed, as the guards dragged him into the vacuum of the corridor. The truth, Praetor. The Chalice Order keeps impeccable records. Logic always wins, always. Duh. Nyx Arden looked at the data slate, a cold, heavy dread settling in her stomach, a dread that had nothing to do with the vacuum or the battle. She picked it up. The Vesper Spire was stable. The crown engine pulsed with a calm, healthy, sapphire light. The human maintenance crews, now elevated to a position of bewildered prominence, worked alongside the Xylos engineers, adding manual overrides and simple, physical valves to every major system. The philosophy of simple first, smart later was being implemented, much to the horror of the old technocracy. In the Empress's private study, Seraphine Kale stood before the holographic display. The room was quiet. He said precisely that? She asked, her voice dangerously still. Nyx Arden stood at attention. Yes, Your Majesty. She takes excellent care of his children. Then he gave me this. She placed the data slate on the console. It is Chalice Order encryption, but it is keyed to your biosignature. Only you can open it. Seraphine looked at the data slate as if it were a venomous snake. The blood drained from her face, leaving her a pale, marble statue. She knew. She had always known this day might come. The one variable she had introduced into the imperial equation. The one secret she had kept not just from the court, but from herself. Praetor, she said, her voice a strained whisper. You will leave me. You will seal this sector. No one is to enter. No one. Under penalty of death. Nyx, her face a mask of loyal confusion, recognized the gravity of the command. Your Majesty, she bowed, backed out of the study, and sealed the heavy doors, leaving the Empress alone with her past. Seraphine stared at the slate. Her hand was shaking, not from fear of Theros, but from shame, from a decision made a dozen years ago, when she was a new, young Empress, facing the extinction of her line. She placed her palm on the slate. It hissed, recognizing her genetic code, and a holographic file projected into the air. It was not a message. It was a record, a clinical, cold, Chalice Order report. The projection showed the High Council chamber, 12 years ago. A younger Seraphine, rigid and terrified on the throne. A younger, smoother Theros Vale, making his presentation. The Kale line is sterile, Your Majesty, the holographic Theros said, his voice polite. A genetic terminus. Your dynasty ends with you. The Aurelian block will shatter. What is your solution, High Regent? Her younger self asked, her voice betraying nothing. The Aurelian embryo program, Theros replied, gesturing to a complex genetic chart. We have a bank of donors, the greatest minds, the strongest warriors, from every core species of the block. We will build your heir, a hybrid of Kale nobility and pure, scientific logic. An empress bred for the Chalice Order's vision. An empress who will not be burdened by sentiment. The memory Seraphine watched him, her face impassive. She saw the trap. An heir built by the technocrats would be a puppet for the technocrats. Her dynasty would be hollowed out, replaced by cold, hard logic. She needed a ruler, but she also needed a heart. "I will consider it," her younger self said, and the hologram shifted. It now showed her alone, in her private laboratory. She had approved the program, but she had subverted it. She had bypassed the Chalice Order's official donor bank. She had, with her supreme authority, accessed a different, forbidden database, a humanitarian registry, a list of those who had registered their genetic codes not for power, but for altruism. She filtered the results. She needed high-level neural harmonic compatibility. She needed a deep, intuitive understanding of biosystems. She needed, she realized, a variable that Theros' logic could never, ever account for. She needed a human. The file appeared on the screen. "Hail, Aaron. Biosystems Architect. Clearance 9. A younger face stared back at her. Confident, warm, intelligent. The face of a man at the absolute peak of his profession, before his life had collapsed, before he had retreated into the maintenance stratum to hide himself and his daughter. Registration, reason. The file read, Altruistic Donation, Pediatric Biorepair and Regeneration Program. He had registered his genes to save sick children. She had made her choice. She, the Empress, had secretly synthesized the Kale genetic matrix with the base code of an unknown, altruistic human architect. She had created Astra and Mira not as pureblood rulers, but as hybrids. She had built the manual override for her own empire directly into its DNA. The hologram faded. Seraphine stood in the darkness. The truth finally, terribly, laid bare. It was not coincidence. It was not a strange trauma bond. The princesses had imprinted on Aaron's voice in the nursery because they were, on the most fundamental level, listening to their father. Mira's bioempathy, her ability to hear the engine and command the fibers, was his genetic gift, magnified by Kale royalty. The family chorus that had unlocked her glass prison had worked because the crown engine, the living machine, had recognized the harmonic signature of its original architect, unified with his own bloodline. She had borrowed his heart, and he had paid for it with his body. She summoned him to the gravity garden. He came, not as a janitor, not as a general, but as Aaron. He had a new prosthetic, a marvel of imperial technology, sleek and silver white, that looked almost like a piece of polished armor, but he wore a simple gray tunic. He looked tired, but the hunted look he had worn as a janitor was gone. He was no longer hiding. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice quiet. He saw the look on her face, the raw, unguarded pain. "Nyx found him." "She did," Seraphine said. She was standing by the new Plaz crystal wall, staring at the pinprick lights of Aurelian Prime far below. "He is gone. The threat is over, but he left. A confession. His and mine." Aaron waited, his new hand clenching and unclenching at his side, the microservos whining softly. "When I took the throne," Seraphine began, her voice a low tremor, "I was told my bloodline was sterile, that the Kale dynasty would die with me. The Chalice Order, led by Theros, offered a solution, a hybrid embryo, built from the best species, an heir of pure logic." "A puppet," Aaron said, understanding immediately. "A puppet," she agreed. "I knew I could not allow it. I needed an heir who was more than logic. I needed a variable, something they could not predict, something human." Aaron went very still. The air in the garden suddenly felt thin. I subverted their program, Seraphine whispered. I accessed a forbidden donor bank, a human humanitarian registry. I searched for a biosystems expert, someone with the highest level neural harmonics, someone whose genetic code was registered not for power, but for compassion. She turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. It was an anonymous file. Aaron, I swear to you, I never looked at the name. I just chose. I just knew. Aaron felt the floor drop out from under him. The pieces of the last few months, the strange, magnetic pull to the twins, Mira's powers, the song in the engine, it all slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The donor, he breathed, his voice hoarse. The architect who registered to save sick children. It was you, Seraphine finished. Astra and Mira. They are not just my daughters. They are, biologically, your daughters, too. He stumbled, his prosthetic legs skidding on the grass. He had to brace himself against a flowering trellis, his organic hand and his metal one gripping the same support. He was shaking. My daughters, he whispered. It was not a question. It was a revelation that rewrote his entire world. He looked at her, and his face was a storm of betrayal, confusion, and a sudden, terrible, aching understanding. You knew. When I was in the vents, when I was scrubbing your floors, when they were trapped in that room. You let me. No, she cried, stepping forward, her imperial coldness shattering into 1,000 pieces. I did not, I swear on the crown. I knew I had used an anonymous human donor. That was all. I buried the file. I was afraid to know. And you were just Custodian Hale. A ghost. A man hiding from his past. How could I possibly have known? She stopped, inches from him. It was not until the core chamber, when the family chorus worked, when the engine listened to you. I knew then. I knew what impossible, terrible thing I had done. You lied to me, he said, his voice flat, dead. I was ashamed, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was ashamed that I had let you, the man who was the secret heart of my dynasty, suffer the prejudice of my own court. I was ashamed that I had built my children's future from a life I thought was anonymous. I am sorry, Aaron, for all of it. The sound of shrieking laughter cut through the heavy silence. Astra, Mira, and Nova burst into the garden, their 3 Lights Project lesson clearly over. They were running, chasing a small, sputtering drone that was smoking slightly. It is your fault, Astra yelled at Nova. You overloaded the power cell. I did not, Nova yelled back. You set the velocity too high for the motor, Dad. Tell her. He cannot, Mira giggled, skidding to a halt. He is the one who showed us how to do it. They all stopped, sensing the immense, heavy silence between the 2 adults. Dad, Nova asked, her smile fading. What is wrong? Your face is weird. Aaron looked at his daughter of love, of choice, of shared history. Then he looked at Astra and Mira, his daughters of blood, of biology, of a secret destiny. Astra, sensing his distress, immediately ran to him, her usual defiance replaced by a fierce protectiveness. She grabbed his new, metal hand. What did she say to you? Are you in trouble? Mira, the empath, just walked slowly to his side and leaned her head against his good leg, her small body trembling. You are so loud, she whispered, overwhelmed by his shock. It hurts. Aaron looked down at the 3 of them, his daughter, his daughters. The confusion, the anger at Seraphine, the sense of betrayal. It all just evaporated. It did not matter. The logic did not matter. The past did not matter. There was only the here and now. There was only them. Nova, his brilliant, perceptive Nova, looked at Astra's face, then at Mira's. She looked at her father's stunned, heartbroken expression, and then at the weeping Empress. And, with the simple, irrefutable logic of a child, she understood. A slow, radiant smile spread across her face. "Oh," she whispered, a sound of pure revelation. She walked over and took Mira's hand, completing the circle. "Well, that makes sense." Aaron looked at her, baffled. "Our family," Nova said, her voice bright and clear, beaming at her father, as if he were the slow one. "It just got a lot bigger. Dad?" Aaron stared at her, then at Astra, then at Mira. He let out a long, shuddering breath that was half a sob, half a laugh. He knelt, his new prosthetic leg whirring softly, and wrapped his one good arm, and one new metal one, around all three of them, pulling them into a tight, messy, unimperial hug. He looked up at Seraphine, who was watching them, her hands pressed to her mouth. The ice in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective warmth. "You are the Empress," he said, his voice thick, "and I am the Custodian General, and I am their father. This is a political catastrophe." "Yes," Seraphine whispered, a tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. "It is." "I do not want the throne," Aaron said, his voice hard and absolute, standing up. "I do not want your power. I am not a prince. I am the screw." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "But I am their father, and I am her father, and that gives me a different kind of authority." "What do you want, Aaron?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I want the right to be here," he said, his voice raw. "I want the right to cook them dinner, even if I burn it. I want to teach them how to fix a leaky pipe and how to parse Xylo's treaty law. I want to tell them stories about stupid, brave screws. I want the right to be their dad. The human way. No politics. No bloodlines. Just that." Seraphine nodded, a look of profound, aching relief on her face. "That is the most logical request I have heard. That is granted." The gravity garden, fully healed, was warm and bright. A small, simple table was set up, covered not in state documents, but in schematics. Astra, Mira, and Nova were huddled around a large blueprint, arguing. It was the final design for the new, mechanical atmospheric override, Aaron's big, red wheel. "The crowned screw sticker goes on the wheel," Astra insisted, holding the sticker sheet. "It is the primary operational point. It is logical." "No," Nova argued, pointing. "It goes on the instruction plate, so people read it before they turn the wheel. That is safety protocol." Mira, saying nothing, gently took the sticker sheet from Astra's hand. With the focused, solemn precision of a surgeon, she began to peel the small, crowned screw stickers off and place them, one by one, on every single bolt and rivet shown on the blueprint. "There," she announced, patting the paper. "Now all the screws are princes. They are all holding it together." Aaron watched them, his new silver hand resting on the table. He was learning to use it for delicate work. He was, at that moment, trying to peel an adhesive label from his own nutrient paste sandwich, which he had accidentally wrapped in industrial tape. The garden door hissed open. Empress Seraphine Kale entered. She was not in her gown of light. She was not in her cold, pragmatic uniform. She was wearing a simple, dark blue civilian tunic. She looked, for a moment, like a woman coming home from a long day at work. She paused, taking in the scene, the three girls bickering happily over blueprints. Aaron, struggling with his sandwich. In the corner of the garden, A new tool leaned against the wall. It was not his old mop. It was a gleaming, silver and white, multifunctional diagnostic tool, with a dozen complex attachments. His new badge of office. Seraphine looked at the chaotic, happy table. She looked at Aaron, who smiled a greeting. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and unclasped the small, silver circlet from her head. It was her simple crown of state, the symbol of her absolute authority. She walked across the grass. She did not go to the table. She went to the corner, where Aaron's new tool rested. She knelt, and gently placed the imperial crown on the floor, right next to the tool's base. The crown and the mop, side by side. Then she walked to the table and looked at the last empty chair. Aaron pushed the chair out with his foot. "You are late, Your Majesty," he said, finally getting the tape off his sandwich. "They are getting cold." Seraphine sat down, between Astra and Nova. She picked up her own sandwich, looked at the chaotic blueprints, and took a bite. The Vesper Spire pulsed with light, a monument to the genius and logic of a dozen species, orbiting a world of perfect order. Empires could build wonders that touched the stars. But here, in a small, reclaimed garden, a messy, illogical, and profoundly human family had just saved that wonder, not with power, but with heart. They had saved the machine, simply by reminding it how to breathe.